Look at the adjective. Play.
I respect you, Brooker Man. And I have half the brain that you do.
Right. I told you. Oh, God.
Now is the franchise going to take the Viagra?
Gonna put some butts in the seat.
Hello there, wrestling fans, and welcome to episode number 93 of Because WCW, the podcast, where the big boys play. My name is the Twisted Genius, Dean Ayers, and I'm joined as ever by my esteemed, respected, blue tick wanker of a co-host, Liam Happ. Liam, good evening to you. I gave a little bit of praise. I took it away again with the very same hand.
Yeah, he went hot, he went cold. This is borderline on an abusive relationship, I'll have you know. But thankfully I'm in too good a mood to care about that. Or when I say too good a mood, I think I'm just too tired to be able to care is more accurate.
Why are you tired? Is this the joys of having a 4-year-old daughter?
Well, there's
5-year-old.
Yeah, she's
five.
She's five now, and she's very much awake in her room, just a few yards away. Just waiting for her to go to sleep. As long as she doesn't come running in and make herself the latest guest on, because WCW, that'll be good. Because
as long as she can review a pay-per-view, we don't mind.
I was going to say, between you and me, Dean, I don't think she's caught too many Starrcades, but I'll work on that. The chief cause of my knackerness this week is the fact that live on the Zone this Saturday you will get Canelo Alvarez versus Billy Joe Saunders, one of the bigger fights you'll see this year, especially with the other big fight messing us around. We don't know if that's actually going to happen in Saudi Arabia or not. In the UK, for just $1.99 a month, you can get 30 days of the Zone, which will include Canelo Saunders on Saturday. But that involves doing a shed load of content for the digital and the news side of things. So it's going to be one of those weeks. But yeah, it's been productive and happy. So that's what matters.
That's good. My week's been highlighted or accentuated by fishing a succession of dead magpies out of a pond. Yeah. We've got this big pond at the end of the garden that we're trying to get rid of, and
I'm going to call it from now on. I'm going to refer to it as the murder pond for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Basically, it's covered in pondweed, and so it looks green. And we've been told that apparently these magpies, who are notorious thieving bastards, have been swooping down into it to thinking it's grass, and then basically getting tangled up in this pondweed and dying. It's only the magpies that it's happening to. All the other birds seem fine. So thankfully today the bin men came and failed to notice the 3 magpie corpses that we'd smuggled into the rest of the rubbish, and off it went. So the job's a good one.
This sounds like a really tedious, low-rent murder mystery film where you're trying to smuggle these corpses out.
The Magpie Mysteries or something. But we did see 2 in the pond at once, to which I asked my other half, "Oh, there's 2 of them. That's lucky, isn't it?" But I don't know if it is or not, if they're dead. But anyway, we've got a pay-per-view review. We've got ourselves a brand new special guest.
Brand spanking new.
Yeah, none of your returning guest bollocks. No, this is brand spanking new. This is a man that I've known for many years. Originally as a wrestling fan and a stand-up comedian, and now he's involved here and there in the business. I would like to say, I respect you, Brooker Man. It is Chris Brooker. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Dean, and thank you for acknowledging that my nickname / ubiquitous ID on social media, the Brooker Man, was all the way back then inspired by Brian Pillman's promo. Not many people pick that up.
Yes, and of course the first part of the Brian Pillman Dark Side of the Ring documentary is out this week. I don't know if you've had a chance to catch that yet, but it's very good.
I haven't as yet, but yeah, it's the whole Dark Side of the Ring thing. They're great documentaries, but I've found at the moment, for general lifestyle reasons, that I've got to be in the right mood to watch something that might be this way.
Yes.
not despairing. I'll happily just go back and watch Adam Rose's debut over and over again when things were innocent and happy and joyous.
Yes. Oh, bless. So as I mentioned, I've known you for many a year. But for those people who may not be aware, because we have people listening from, I think it's like 50 odd countries and parts unknown. Tell us a little bit about you and your background, and who is Chris Brooker?
Who is Chris Brooker? This has suddenly become like a dating site, hasn't it? slash job in slash. I've become Dutch. Greetings, Dutch viewers. This is borderline racist. Yeah. What can I say? Stand-up comic. Been doing this sort of, God help us, 20 years. I should probably be more successful and or famous. But my first love, like you get all these people in comedy whose first love is music or rock and roll. First love was wrestling. Loved wrestling before I loved comedy. And then sort of found my way back into it as a fan. We first met in Doncaster.
Yes, 1PW.
Of all the exotic places in the world. And if wrestling shows in Doncaster were weird, comedy shows in Doncaster were weirder. I did one in the middle. Gigging at a comedy night on a Saturday in Doncaster was like walking onto the set of RoboCop 2. It was terrifying. I felt like we needed to be escorted back to our cars. But from sort of coming along to British wrestling shows as a fan, I got involved. I dabbled in training a bit until I realised I have the natural athletic ability of a futon. So too old, and I don't like pain or exercise, and those are both quite big parts of pro wrestling.
That is true, yes.
It's quite a big deal, yeah. And then sort of transitioned from that into commentary for Future Shot Wrestling in Manchester. Ended up booking the place because I thought to myself, I've got too many friends and too much money. How can I put that right in one fell swoop? I know, I'll run a wrestling promotion, and it worked. It's brilliant. Destitute and despised, but. And then on the other side of that as well, happy accident on Twitter put me in touch with Mick Foley many moons ago, and I did some tours with him, Roddy Piper, and DDP and William Regal. In fact, weirdly, what Tokyo documentaries, the Roddy Piper one on A&E, just didn't expect this. A couple of clips of him at the Empire in Belfast and the garage in Glasgow from our tour popped up.
Oh wow!
Which when your sleep pattern is random, and I was at 4 a.m. just watching it, that was an emotional moment. I did mention I was a little bit raw earlier on, but yeah, that's my thing. I think I'm slowly turning into the Forrest Gump of wrestling in that I appear to just pop up in the background randomly. But that's my role at the moment, and I'm very much enjoying it.
Well, it must have been this last year plus must have been an awful time to be trying to earn a living as a stand-up comedian.
Well, I mean, it's not so bad. At least I could blame my empty diary on something other than being shit. It's nice to have that pressure taken off.
True.
Yeah. It's you see this so much from other people that I've heard this a lot. It was like March of last year. I genuinely just gone, you know what? Things are going well. I feel like I've got my shit together. And then obviously society crumbled. So apologies, everyone.
Yeah.
But essentially just the industry went away. So there were no gigs. And as someone who sort of straddles, I've been very, very lucky to make a living or be involved as in two things that I love, which is comedy and pro wrestling. And then they both went away. And all I had left then was Just Eating Tiger King, and here I am.
But you've been doing, I know from you've been talking about this on Twitter. You've been doing some like one-on-one seminars with people regarding character and promo and all the non-physical side of things.
Yes. I mean, I might have the athleticism of a futon, but I like to think I'm as comforting and welcoming as one as well. As long as you have to sleep longer than a night on it. I've been dabbling in sort of coaching because I've been lucky enough to work with people who are smarter than me. So I've sort of hung around. You can't hang around people like William Regal and not learn a thing or two.
Very true. Yeah.
You can't. If there was a way to pay to sit in a car for 3 hours to drive from Birmingham to Glasgow with someone who knows that much and just absorb, it's amazing. And then also bringing in what I've learned doing stand up and doing improv And being an MC, where you kind of have to walk out and communicate who you are straight away to an audience who doesn't know who you are, a lot of those skills are transferable. And and basically, my big thing is that everyone's very, very nervous about public speaking. And the promo side of wrestling gets neglected because everyone's nervous about it. So it gets to be 5 minutes at the end of some sessions, whereas I kind of go, no, we'll make it a thing. And it's mad because in these sessions, it's often the first time someone sat down for an hour and thought about nothing else other than their character and their promos, and it's amazing because it just blows their mind, and they go away buzzing. It's all very positive.
Excellent. I also have to just mention before we move on that I think it was the first time I saw you doing comedy. One part of the routine that you did, and it has stayed with me ever since, was if you change the word dance to wank, and how it changes a song title, such as I want to wank with somebody, just want to wank the night away, private wanker. I mean, we could go on, and it was a good routine of yours until it was stolen by Twitter, I believe.
I always knew it had a shelf life on it, and I want to say my mum was very proud of what I talk about on stage. You know, the hard hitting stuff. It's not just about making people laugh, Dean. It's about making people think. But yeah, that was fun. That was it was a great little routine that I did. It was so childish. It's so much fun to do. And getting texts off people, like another comic at a wedding where they played Lord of the Dance as they hear me, said, "You ruined this wedding." And it was so much fun because I had this build and all these little jokes, and when it flew, it was amazing because I'd genuinely end, as if you remember, by getting everyone to sing Lord of the Wank, which was like revenge for all these primary school sessions. We had to sing this hymn. And when it worked, it was amazing. It was childish. There was no cleverness to it at all. But when it didn't work, when an audience just went, no, this is frankly silly, loneliest place in the world, knowing you've still got a verse to go.
We've talked about this before. The similarities between stand-up comedy and wrestling are enormous in so many different ways, and yeah. I can imagine, if the crowd are shitting all over your match and you've still got 5 minutes before the finish, it's a similar dying feeling.
I had a very real empathetic moment, and I don't know if I made eye contact, but I felt like I did because I went to WrestleMania 25 and on my own because I'm a winner, and I got pretty close to ringside. There was like one ringside seat left, and I bought it before my credit card slipped out of my hands, and I got to watch Triple H and Randy Orton. That was their night where their shit just died, unfortunately. And following the matches beforehand, and I just sort of watched them working their asses off, and no one cared. And I just went, I've been there, mate. This is your second verse of Lord of the Dance. I understand. It's the loneliest place on earth.
Loneliest place on earth. Absolutely.
Listen up, slapnuts. That's right. This is Jeff Jarrett, the chosen one, and you're listening to Because WCW. Now choke on that.
So we are doing a pay-per-view review. Please tell us what show have you chosen and why have you chosen it?
Oh man, I have chosen WCW Starrcade 1992. And the reason I've chosen it is because this is a pivotal moment in my fandom, because this was one of the first wrestling videos I bought, and it all feels so archaic these days. Talking about going to Woolworths now that we have all of wrestling at our fingertips, you just type it in a search bar and it'll be somewhere, But it was Starrcade 92. I bought it at Woolworths in Weston-super-Mare. It was before the internet, obviously. It was before I bought magazines. I had watched a bit of WCW on ITV, but I didn't know any of the storylines because it was so far behind. I didn't know the results. This entire show was a mystery to me. I don't think on the back it even went into much detail about it, other than it was the Lethal Lottery. And yeah, 1992, and I wore this mother out. This video just got played and played. I think I had this Survivor Series 1990 and UK Rampage 92. That was my network. That was my WWE network. You know?
Oh, fantastic. Well, first thing that has to be said about this show is that in the introduction, they say this is the 10th annual Starrcade event, and Starrcade started in 1983. And I was immediately relieved because, well, we're going back to what you just mentioned, Chris, WrestleMania 25, because at least WCW can understand the concept of anniversaries, because WrestleMania 25, which was the 24th anniversary of WrestleMania, was billed as the 25th anniversary. And all these years later, I still haven't let that go. So I think before we go into any of the matches, there's something that's an overriding theme here that we really need to mention, because otherwise we're just going to keep hammering it all night, which is that, I mean, the Battlebowl concept was pretty horrendous last year, so obviously they're bringing it back. But we've got a load of title matches featuring the same wrestlers on the show. So we've got Ron Simmons defending the world title against, well, Rick Rude is the build contender, but he doesn't appear. We'll go into that later. We've got the world tag champions Shane Douglas and Ricky Steamboat facing Barry Windham and Brian Pillman, whose captions are the wrong way around on the on-screen graphic, but they are in the Lethal Lottery as well. And Masahiro Chono is defending the NWA World Heavyweight title against the Great Mutar. And Mutar is in the Lethal Lottery. Plus, we've got Sting and Vader in the final of the King of Cable tournament. And they're also in the Lethal Lottery. And is this basically the most ADHD pay-per-view in wrestling history?
It's up there, but again, as somebody who didn't have Sky, as teenage me, 17-year-old me, didn't have Sky TV, and considering I used to chop all the WCW VHS releases to bits, they used to leave half the matches off. This was value for money. This to me was like getting a 24-inch Domino's pizza. Mate, even if it was shit, I was going to eat all of it. I was so happy when I saw there was loads on there.
But, I mean, Liam, what are your thoughts? I mean, surely it dilutes the novelty of seeing each person come out, doesn't it?
Well, if you think about it, this continues a long history of WCW completely and utterly failing to recognise the value of the Starrcade brand. Because we covered, not too long ago, we covered Starrcade 95, which did the same thing, having wrestlers appear twice. I think a couple of them wrestled 3 times, because they paired the this triangle match and the world title match with the World Cup of Wrestling. There's so much going on, so busy. And they seem hell-bent. They've got to have Iron Man tournaments, or they've got to have lethal lotteries and battle bowls, rather than just having it be like WrestleMania, the big blow-off to the end of a season of storylines, which, as the WrestleMania's proven, by virtue of being the one that still fucking exists, is a very healthy way to do it. You know, we could have people being instructed point blank to constantly point at a Starrcade sign every week for 3 months, but we don't, because they fail to recognise the value of the brand. I did go on a little side rant on Twitter earlier today, the day of recording, where I said I'd love to see Lethal Lottery used by AEW, who have done a good job so far they've done a good job of branding episodes of Dynamite and making them like special, almost sort of like pay-per-views but on TV. And I think that'd be the perfect place for the Lethal Lottery concept, because it's got no place taking over a pay-per-view concept that will probably already sell. If there were still like all these B pay-per-views like the in your house era Clash of Champions, a Lethal Lottery could maybe boost one of those up to do above average numbers, because they always trail behind the big concepts. And I think an episode of Dynamite with because they do love a bit of nuanced characters, and you'll see the little interactions between faces and heels. We'll go in depth as we go match by match. I'd love to see something like that, because I think AEW could pull that off.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that'd be the place for it.
I'm going to be a bit of a devil's advocate. I've not spoken to real people in a long time. To say that, I mean, I kind of get where WCW was coming from, and also it's such a weird time in wrestling history. WCW, like in '91 when Ric Flair left and everything kind of fell apart, and then in 1992 they're trying to figure out who they are. I kind of get that they went through this phase of we just want to try and be different and try different things. And I think that this 92, I get the idea of having like a sort of a thread or a theme through it. And I think in principle, for my taste at least, when they only had the 4 matches for Battle Bowl and then the Battle Royal, it felt like it was an interesting thing that didn't necessarily then take everything over. So the next year
like
they
it
went
did
to
the
a
year
Battle
before.
Bowl pay-per-view of its own. So it's a bit like what they did with Money in the Bank in WWE. But it's such a, I think that there was it speaks to where WCW was as a company, that there was this quick, try something, do something. And then you had the sort of the entire Battle Bowl the year before, then later, then they gave up on it very quickly, brought it back at Slamboree and made it more complicated, you know. And I think as well, we'll talk about it during the matches, but I think this Starrcade '92, it really speaks to where WCW was at the time, in terms of they've just lost some major players over the last year and a half, and their tag division's just fallen apart. Oh, anyway, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But I think at heart, it's interesting enough for my taste that it was worth having a go.
Okay. Well, we'll see how it all pans out. But yeah, this is I think this will be the 3rd year in a row that oh no, what I was going to say, the 3rd year in a row that some people have wrestled 3 times. But that because 89 and 90, but 91 you only wrestled twice. But yeah, I can't personally see like WWE giving over an entire WrestleMania to a concept. But as you said, Liam, it is something they seem to often do with Starrcade and that Starrcade brand. But it is December the 28th, 1992. We're coming at you from the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia, which had previously seen Starrcade action in 1985, 86, and 89. Our hosts and commentators are Jesse the Body Ventura and Jim Ross, the latter of whom will be working his last ever WCW pay-per-view. Straight away, though, we go to a WCW magazine special report, the music and graphics of which remind me, and I'm sure they remind you, Chris, of those 3 a.m. broadcasts of WCW on a Saturday night, Sunday morning in the early 90s on ITV. We are told by Eric Bischoff, though, that Rick Rude has suffered a herniated disc in his back. He's unable to compete, and that the WCW Board of Directors have declared Steve Dr. Death Williams to be the new challenger to the title because, well, Bill Watts, I guess, given that, well, to my knowledge, Liam, correct me if I'm wrong, but Steve Williams didn't wrestle an awful lot of singles matches, and he didn't wrestle an awful lot in WCW because he was in All Japan as well.
No, you're spot on. He was brought in primarily to do the team with Terry Gordy that, as we saw from the Great American Bash 92 review we did, was mostly there just to drag things along on the mat for extraordinary long periods of time. But this whole intro, this brings up a hypothetical for me. Now, we've just gone past the 20th anniversary of the demise of WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if WCW had somehow survived this long to see the pandemic, and they're forced to not be able to do shows in front of a live crowd like everyone else for over a year, and they're just like we all are now. They're desperate to get that feeling, that electricity of the live crowd back. And then the day comes they can finally welcome a capacity crowd to a major event, and they start the show and they go, "Welcome to WCW Starrcade," and the crowd are going mad, and they go, "Now we're going to talk for 10 minutes about what's to come." In fact, instead of telling you exactly why we're talking for 10 minutes, we're going to go to a video that you're going to find it very difficult to watch inside the building. So you sit there on your hands for 10 minutes, even though we've just got you pumped with the official intro. As you guys might have, who are listening, you might have noticed, I moan about this every time WCW do it, because it's just absolutely mind-boggling how they can just get the live crowd pumped and then stagger out with 5 to 10 minutes. I think I recorded this particular one as 7 minutes and 15 seconds.
Correct, yes.
Before we got the actual entrance for a wrestler who's going to have a match.
Well, That's because before we have some wrestling, we've got to give Bill Watts some airtime.
Oh, of course.
And look who's in the ring with Liam. Hank Aaron. Oh,
Yes.
they'd encounter one another again, wouldn't they?
Yeah, it got a bit icy after that, didn't it? But
Yeah.
as it turns out, Bill Watts' views on who he thinks people should have the right to refuse service to, apparently it's okay to serve them and be nice to them if they're really, really famous baseball legends. Then he's happy to suck up to them no end, and that's pretty much exactly what he does here with that really awkward smirk on his face and the badly timed claps for every time Schiavone crows about, and you can tell that Schiavone's got a bit of a background with local sports here. Of course, he'd go on to cover a lot of local baseball after WCW folded, didn't he? And
Yes.
he's doing a big job of hyping up the fact that Hank Aaron's here at the Omni, and Bill Watts just looking so awkward and stupid and clapping at the wrong intervals.
Good old Bill.
Good old Bill.
So they then bring Sting out to collect his ring from last year, which is one of the most underwhelming things I've ever seen in my life, because Sting basically turns up, picks his ring up, and fucks off again.
It
Battle
felt
Bowl.
less like a big award ceremony as someone being called up in assembly because they've left something in the classroom or lost property. Sting, we know it's yours. It's got your name on it. Come and get it. All right, thank you. And off he goes. Yeah, it felt like that. This show felt like a show of two Stings for me, because for this and I think the tag match, kind of felt like he wanted to be somewhere else.
That's because he probably did back in the locker room getting ready for his match with Vader. Yeah. So yeah, as we mentioned last year, we had 10 matches, 40 wrestlers involved. It took the whole show over. This year, probably because Bill Watts has slashed the roster with cost-cutting measures, we've got 4 matches, 16 wrestlers, and well, is there anything that sums up Bill Watts' reign in WCW better than that? Just slashing the numbers of a fucked up concept, but keeping it going. So the draw for the tag matches are being done by Larry Zbyszko and Missy Hyatt, who seems to be wearing some sort of bizarre tit harness made out of straps that you normally find on a backpack. That's the only way I could describe it. It was very strange. She also seems to be thrilled at the fact that she's being joined by Larry Zbyszko. But as you say, Liam, 7 minutes, 15 seconds into the show, we're finally getting some wrestling. And out of all the matches that they had, this is the one that they decided not only to put on first, but to actually say that they'd already drawn these people out ahead of time. So you knew this is what you're getting. Van Hammer and Dan Spivey v Johnny B. Bad and Cactus Jack.
Yeah, we might as well skip this over because I know usually Dean likes to say, so Liam, after the opener, let's be honest, this particular piece of art was a piece of gunk that has then been left out in the rain to corrode and weather for, 7 minutes and 15 seconds.
Yeah. So just to make things even more generic and uninspiring, everyone comes out to the generic and uninspiring Battlebowl music, which takes away from someone like Johnny B. Bad and their entrance. Van Hammer comes out minus his guitar, thank God. Spivey's still sporting an amazing mullet. And in true Bill Watts style, the arena is very dimly lit. Only the first few rows are visible, which kind of makes it small time. But to Bill Watts, I think his theory was it made you focus on the ring, wasn't it, rather than the crowd or something. But so we start with Van Hammer and Cactus Jack, who have at least worked together before. I don't know how long Van Hammer's been wrestling by this point in time, but he still looks dreadful. Nearly breaks his neck when he lands on his head, taking a Hurricane Rana style head scissors from Johnny B. Bad. Finally, Spivey gets tagged in. Him and Cactus start clubbing away at each other, but it's not long before he tags Hammer in again. Hammer whips Bad into the ropes. Spivey puts his knee up into Bad's back. Hammer isn't happy with this and confronts Spivey, who slaps Hammer's hand, tags himself back into the match, and then clamps on a bear hug and tags Hammer back in. So I think it's fair to say that he really can't be asked. We then get a prolonged period of time with Spivey v Cactus as Bad is lying hurt on the floor. Bad then gets back into the ring, tries to break up a pinfall attempt, but he accidentally elbow drops Cactus. The two of them argue. Bad lands a left hook to Cactus's jaw. He is rolled up by Van Hammer for the pinfall in 6 minutes and 51 seconds. Chris, what did you make of our opener?
Do you know what? Again, I get stuck between watching it as a 17-year-old and watching it as a deeply cynical man in his mid-40s. And quite honestly, the 17-year-old's winning. Again, maybe I'm just looking for joy wherever I can. I really quite liked the match in terms of it didn't. The thing I found about the Lethal Lottery matches, the tag matches, is none of them outstayed their welcome, and they all had a few little moments here and there that the crowd kind of came up for, like seeing like two lunatics, like Cactus Jack, the well-known lunatic, and Dan Spivey, who doesn't look like he's blinked since he left WWF in the early 80s. You know? You get the feeling that they're legit nuts. There was the point where everyone kind of, at that point, it was all about eagle versus shark matches. It was all about seeing shit that you wouldn't normally see. And I think the novelty of seeing Johnny B. Bad and Cactus Jack together, you know, it set the table for me. And there were a few nice little moments. I loved Spivey's sort of boss man slam as well. That was a delight. And it just told its story. No one stuck around too much. That Frankenstein looked absolutely horrible. That was my first audible swear word as I watched it.
Well, he nearly dropped Johnny B. Bad, I think, didn't he? And then Johnny B. Bad couldn't get himself up well enough to come back down again.
Oh man, it was a proper Scott Steiner, I don't like you very much during an enhancement match kind of Frankenstein. Rather than rolling through into Hurricane Rana, I think Van Hammer went, how do I take this? I'll just land on my head. You know, maybe it will have knocked some musical sense into him. Who knows? Maybe he discovered a new riff off of it.
Liam?
Yeah, I think if it had any effect on Van Hammer, it might have been insert some sort of topical joke about his recent brushes with the law here, because I'm really blanking. Can we get maybe the stand-up comedian to fill in the gap? It's got to be.
I don't know anything about his recent brushes with the law.
Something about a sex shop or something, wasn't it? It was.
No, he's drink drive. I think it was a hit and run car accident or something.
Then what was that stuff about Van Hammer and the sex shop then?
That sounds like a setup
I'm adamant
for a very
there
good
was.
joke.
Yeah, I feel like we got all the components here, Chris, but we just need to.
You know what? If you'd have put this in front of me in March of last year, I'd have been on fire. But I'm so far off my game at the moment.
Lacking match practice, as they say on Football Manager.
All I know is that if we named these podcasts, then we've already got A Tale of Two Stings and Van Hammer in the Sex Shop as potential titles. So we'll move on to the second match, which is another Lethal Lottery match. It's Dustin Rhodes and Big Van Vader, with Harley Race, of course, against Kensuke Sasaki and the Barbarian. And going back to what you were just mentioning there, Chris, about unusual or intriguing matches, we start off with Vader v the Barbarian, which is just a great matchup. They even shake hands in a sort of honor among thieves type deal. They exchange short clotheslines, which neither man sells, but a Barbarian body slam on Vader gets a big pop for the crowd. After more stalemates, Vader knocks Barbarian to the canvas with his trademark vertical splash and forearms in the corner. Barbarian then knocks Vader down with a clothesline. Vader tags in Dustin Rhodes. They execute a double team heart attack clothesline to the surprise of Ventura that they're actually working together as a team. Sasaki comes in to take on Rhodes, and the pace picks up, but it's still a power battle. Rhodes slams Sasaki, tags in Vader, who levels Sasaki with a second rope vertical splash. Vader gets a 2 count from a big power slam. Sasaki then counters a Vader vertical suplex with one of his own. Rhodes and Barbarian come back in. Rhodes lands a knee lift and a drop kick. Rhodes goes for a pin after a lariat on Barbarian, but Sasaki makes the save. Curiously, then Rhodes pursues Sasaki over to his corner to confront him about this. Don't quite know why, but Barbarian charges in behind Rhodes. Rhodes moves. Barbarian accidentally nails Sasaki. Rhodes rolls him up for the win in 6 minutes 56 seconds. And after the match, Vader celebrates with Rhodes before absolutely leveling him with a clothesline, followed by a knee drop from Race. Jim Ross seems confused, but as Jesse Ventura explains, the match is over. Rhodes is now back to being an enemy because they've both qualified for the Battle Bowl. What did you make of this one, Chris?
I loved it as much. I remembered the Barbarian Vader stuff, and I remembered loving it when I was younger, and I thought the Barbarian was great even then. But just seeing these two big lads just take turns battering each other was so satisfying, and it's something that I've even kind of, it's a spot that I've nicked when I've been working with big guys and said, go and look at these two big heels beating each other. Because when Vader no-sells Barbarian short on clothesline, which, let's be honest, wasn't a little love tap. He nailed him.
Yeah.
That was a wow. But when Vader did it the same to Barbarian, Barbarian just went, nah, mate. The look on Vader's face was perfect. It was a priceless, like, all right, oh, this is different. And just I really just enjoyed it. And you know what was interesting for this as well was you look at Kensuke Sasaki. No one knew who he was coming down the aisle, I think. And they did a really nice job of giving him a couple of moments that made the audience go, "All right, this guy's got something." They let him suplex Vader, you know, and you know, I think that it was an interesting dynamic, Dustin and Vader, and on the other side as well. But it made me want to see Vader and Barbarian just run into each other repeatedly. Nothing else. Just take turns running into each other. That'll make me happy. Give me a looping gif of them exchanging shoulder blocks, and I'll never need to look at another internet site again.
No, I agree with you. I loved those exchanges. I thought it was great. Liam, what were your thoughts on this one?
See, now I know Chris is a big fan of the matches of this show, and for me, yeah, we kind of said about Art of the Opener, and we joked about it, but let's just say if we're gonna have the enjoyment, the intrigue of Battle Bowl matches, and yeah, it's seeing guys in these weird scenarios having to coexist or face their friends, etc., etc. And I think if you're gonna run that, I would still, at least, in addition to maybe not making the live crowd wait 7 minutes and 15 fucking seconds for a piece of action, I would probably start with a non-tournament match. And I feel like if what we had as the first match was not the first match, it would have been a lot easier to enjoy, as Chris said, just a quick sprint with all these characters kind of doing these weird things. All right, it served its purpose, moved on. This match, on the other hand, the second Battle Bowl match, I absolutely loved it. Yeah, all action, a lot of dichotomy going on, a lot of nuances. Yeah, everything you'd expect from the lethal lottery concept, plus good action as well, which is very important, which a lot of these attempts take for granted. But my MVP of it wasn't even one the men wrestling match, it was Harley Race, because I don't know if you guys noticed this. When they got the draw, you know, Harley Race, heel manager with a big beastly heel protege, and they're getting like the, you know, proper relatively new but fresh-faced, baby-faced Dustin Rhodes as partner. Harley Race was you know, trying to be philosophical about it. He was enthusiastic. He went straight over to speak to Dustin Rhodes, got in the ring. You know, you can imagine it going along the lines of, you know, we're in the same boat here. We're rowing in the same direction. You know, you want to advance, we want to advance. Let's do this. And Dustin was quite agreeable. He didn't do the usual tense baby face. I don't trust you. Get away from me. I don't even want to exchange two words with you. That a lot of baby faces do as part of their character in that situation. And as we saw, Dustin kind of enjoyed a little bit, teamed with him. He was,
Mm.
he did. Not only did he do the double teams like the heart attack, he was aggressive. He had that attitude. He wanted to win, and he adapted to the task at hand. It looked like
Yeah.
we had a winning team. Harley Race was celebrating. He loved what he had on his hands. You could very much imagine a scenario where Harley Race liked this setup so much, he would at least try to talk Dustin round into joining his stable because of the things he saw there. And then as you guys said, Vader celebrated and then leveled him with the clothesline because, yeah, you're my enemy now. And the biggest highlight of it all, Harley Race drops that knee for good measure.
Yes.
Everything I've just described, he did in such a natural way. He put all the faced heel stuff aside and he approached it like a manager would who sees money in front of him, who sees like good talent and a good team, things going his way for the betterment of his career as a manager. And as soon as
The
Vader
second
turns on him, he drops that knee. Because you'll remember, Dean, one of my absolute favourite highlights of the Nitro Watch Along series was that match. What was that match that Ric Flair won, where he knocked a guy out cold with a foreign object, dragged him to the corner so he could put his feet on the ropes for the cover, even though he was unconscious. And then it gets better, Chris. After the 3 count, he then rakes the guy's eyes.
Perfect.
It was the greatest thing I've seen, and I had a flashback to that when Harley Race dropped that knee because it was just glorious shithousery.
I want to give a shout out as well to Harley's turnout. He was dapper as well. He came out in a full tux.
Yes.
And I just got the feeling he looked like the third bouncer from Phoenix Nights. that kind of Northern Working Man's Club. He's got a Northern Working Man Club's face.
Yes.
He's got
that tattoo. Yeah.
That did occur to me as well. There was a bit of a juxtaposition there. I don't know if this occurred to you guys. We're just talking about how they're celebrating the 10th anniversary of Starrcade, and it's by far the biggest event on those day calendar, steeped in the most tradition from the NWA days, an era which Harley Race was obviously he was the top dog, the man, main evented the first Starrcade. And they are currently in this process of really taking for granted the prestige of that name because they're sticking all the Battlebowl and all that stuff on it. As a result, Harley Race is coming out as a manager for a random draw tag match. And yet he's come out because it's Starrcade and because Starrcade means something to him still. He's come out decked in that suit as if he's Bobby Heenan managing Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. So he doesn't care if he's been stuck in this random assignment on what should be a huge occasion for the company. He's gonna wear that suit just like he's gonna take a bump at some point in the night, isn't he, Dean?
He is, because it's contractually obligated. But the thing that I loved about this, in addition to what we've just been saying there, is that, and we saw this in the first match, that the faces and heels not getting on is so predictable, and that actually, if this was a real deal, as Bill Watts was always keen to try and think along those lines, then you would just interact and cooperate with your partner, because then you know that if you get through that, you're into the Battlebowl on your own. It makes sense, and it was just, to me, it was refreshing just to see that happen, because to me that is what would happen if this was a real situation.
Yeah, do you know who I really, as far as like makeshift dysfunctional esque tag teams, rather than the usual, loads of bookers have done it to death, but it's a famous trope of Heyman and Russo in particular where they really overdid it. The whole tag team partners have to get along, but they're going to fight each other and still win the match anyway. That's done to death. But who I really like was, do you guys remember Samoa Joe and Magnus in TNA made a really good run of it?
Yeah.
Subverted the trope, came into a random draw, because that was a random draw tournament, if I remember as well.
Yeah.
And they came in, they were staring at each other, didn't like it, and they started to do their usual thing they do in, if they're putting a tag team assignment on an episode of Impact, they do the things they've got to do to get through the match, and they do it with each other, and they're kind of like, you know what? we're cooking with gas here. I like this. And by the end of the tournament, they won it, and they had double team finishes and everything. And it was a 3-match tournament. And they told that story in 3 matches. And another one I like was Kevin Steen and El Generico when they arrived in Ring of Honor, where there's a clear, nasty, despicable heel and a clear, lovable babyface. But that babyface is passive, and Kevin Steen wears the trousers in the relationship, and he's going to make El Generico do despicable things to the Briscoes with him because they want the tag titles. And Generico's going to do it. He's going to help Steen cheat. He's going to wave to the fans and slap their hands on the way back. So there are 2 examples where you can make it fresh and make it work.
Yeah, and sorry,
getting past that sort of thing where instinctively all bad guys get along and all good guys get along with each other, and they don't get along, and there's that divide. Whereas in real life, it's not that simple. And if you can bring a little bit of that in, it's perfect.
Well, this is something I always get asked by people outside of the wrestling business when they find out that I'm in the wrestling. Like for example, getting your hair cut or something like that, where you're just talking with someone. And the thing that I've heard so many times is they all get on with each other, really, don't they? And exactly as you've said, Chris, I said, well, no. If you get a group of 20 or 30 people, there are going to be people who get on like brothers and become lifelong friends, and there's going to be people who can't stand the sight of each other. It's human nature.
Yeah. I remember in WCW they did a thing where Rick Rude and Paul Orndorff teamed up, I think in '93, and there was a promo where Paul Orndorff was saying, "I've got a team with him. I don't like him. We don't get along. We've got to have to team up," and that was weird in itself and different. So yeah, it's humanity.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to match number 3, another lethal lottery match. This is Barry Windham and the Great Mutar versus Two Cold Scorpio and Brian Pillman. So we've got the World Tag Team title challengers, Windham and Pillman, opposing each other in this horseshit tournament before they fight for the titles. Not to mention Great Mutar having to wrestle in this literally minutes before he challenges for the NWA World title. There's one more match after this. Both teams working together well early on. Mutar catches Pillman with a tremendous drop kick. Windham and Pillman briefly face off, and they are laying the chops into each other. There's no hesitation there at all. Pillman has a wry smile on his face. Mutar lands a spinning kick to the jaw of Pillman to a big pop. Scorpio tags in. He's soon in trouble, though, after Mutar blocks a splash with his knees and tags in the much bigger Windham. Mutar comes in with his patented power drive elbow. Scorpio hits a 450 splash from the ramp over the ropes. Windham hits his DDT on Scorpio, which sets him up for Mutar's match-winning moonsault. Familiar move to the crowd. Gets a pop. 6 minutes, 59 seconds. It's all over. So we've basically had 3 matches which have run to almost identical times within 8 seconds of each other. But yeah, what do you make of this one? Go you first, Chris.
Oh well, it struck me as I was watching this, and what another thing that's weird about watching shows that are, again, this feels like it's 5 years ago and 30 years ago at the same time. Oh God, but is how what happened to all the wrestlers along the way. Some that were very new and have since become legendary for different reasons. Some that have been successful, some that have not. And it's just it struck me partway through where I went, at the time I didn't realize, holy shit, I'm watching Great Muta versus Two Cold Scorpio. If that was happening at like a sort of WrestleMania weekend show, that's the kind of graphic that everyone would retweet, isn't it? Or Muta versus Pillman, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I'd also forgotten how much I love Great Muta's power elbow. It just simply raises my mood wherever I find myself. Just seeing him hit the ropes and drive that elbow down. I quite liked it. I quite liked the little story of, because when Pillman and Windham decided to chop the snot out of each other, there was a point where they just kind of went, all right, calm down. Just take a breath.
Yeah.
We're going to have to team up later. Let's not get too pissy with each other. And they sort of went back to sort of wrestling back and forth. So, and then what I thought, nice little touch at the end of the match was when because Pillman wasn't necessarily getting in as quick as he could to make saves. He could have been more proactive. He wasn't going after Wyndham, definitely. And at the end, they beat Scorpio. Pillman naturally goes over to his partner to say, "You're all right." And Wyndham comes up and goes, "Nah, screw that guy. Come on, let's go." And again, it's that little bit of realism, as you can imagine. They just go, "Look, it's done. Doesn't matter. Come on, let's go worry about something else."
No, very good point. Yeah, very good point.
Yeah.
Liam, what were your take on this one?
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting to think of where some of these characters were headed at this point, because we are starting to get the genesis of this lone wolf persona, Barry Windham. And he and Pillman won't be a team for too long, but Pillman, who's kind of, after that light heavyweight run and then not really being in Bill Watts' good books, he's starting to flirt with the hill side again without actually being full on the hill. And he would find that tag team partner soon after, a guy who wasn't even booked for this show. Not sure if he was injured or not, but of course he'd be soon teaming up with Stunning Steve Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what? Actually, I think I was going to mention this after the lottery match is finished, but I'm gonna sort of mention it now, because the thing I won't disagree with is overexposure, and having wrestlers go 2 or 3 times can just, and I think like Muta is a great example as this show goes on of someone who we kind of just see a little bit too much of. But because you mentioned Steve Austin, when they do the little pan through the locker rooms, you look at the people that were not used. They could have had really interesting matches without having too many repeats. Because in that locker room, you had Steve Austin. He was in there. You had Vinny Vegas, big Vinny Vegas. You had Paul Orndorff. Ricky Steamboat didn't work it, for example. There's almost like this Paul Orndorff. There's
Brad Armstrong.
Brad Armstrong, Marcus Bagwell.
Do you know who my favourite was of all that? I have to get this aside. I don't know if you guys noticed this. My favourite of all those was Tom Zenk. Because Tom Zenk, who again is another one who's not in the good books of the current antiquated dinosaur of a boss, is doing everything he can to get seen on his tiny little cameo, because he's really reacting. He's really reacting to not getting picked. He really wants to. There's one little problem with his game plan. I don't know if you guys noticed this. I believe he's the only guy of all the wrestlers in both the Babyface and the Hill locker room who is not dressed ready to compete. So he's putting all this effort in, like, I want it to be me. Oh no, and he's still dressed like he's blatantly not going to be. So he's kind of undone all his hard work there.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, just you look at how much talent was just. Bobby Eaton was in Heel's dressing room as well. There were so many people that they could have, if they wanted to mix it up a little bit more, they could have. Yeah. But yeah, I've got thoughts about Steve Austin as well. I don't think he was hurt. I think it wouldn't surprise me if they just went, no, we'll just not use him.
Yeah. Wouldn't surprise me at all, because after all, this is WCW. Another thing that's worth noting is that this, I believe I'm right in saying, this was actually the first time Too Cold Scorpio had been pinned. He was a young new star on the rise. But when you look at the match he is in, he is the only person who logistically could have taken the pinfall, because you've got the Great Muta is challenging for the world title in literally the match after next. He obviously can't lose unless he lost and then won the title, and then you've got an immediate challenger, but that obviously doesn't happen. Pillman and Wyndham can't really lose, because that devalues their challenge. They look weak going into their challenge, I suppose, as does the Great Muto if he gets pinned. So the only person that can lose this match is Too Cold Scorpio, who they don't really want to lose the match, but they've decided to match him up.
I don't think
Unless
he wanted
it really was a random draw, but I'm pretty certain that's not the case.
I don't think he went to lose either, judging by that kick out at 3.1, and he was from that double finisher. He was up pretty quickly as well, which couldn't have sat well with too many people.
See, that should have been Tom Zenk's moment. They should have had him coming down the ring, getting his tracksuit off. That should have been Tom Z-Man. Obviously, we call him Z-Man.
Z-Man.
Well, we do.
And of course, The head of NXT should be Treble H.
Exactly.
Well, you do call him Vince McMahon, don't you? So why not?
Okay, we're back with Larry, Missy, and Tony for the final match to be drawn. So I was going to say we know who the 4 participants are, but we don't really, because the idea is that anyone can be in there. Although they seem to know that Sting is going to be in there.
Sting is a lock by virtue of the fact that he won last year.
Oh,
He's
I see.
guaranteed a place. So
Yeah.
we're going to find out whose partner and who his opponents will be.
Yeah, and as you said, Chris, we've got a lot of these people in the background that you just named. So apart from Brad Armstrong and Shanghai Pierce, who are in the dark match, Liam, am I right in thinking here that WCW have literally paid people to sit in the dressing room in their gear on a pay-per-view?
Perish the thought. They would never make a decades habit of that. No way.
Not wasting money like that.
No. They're frugal.
So,
Change their name to Frugal Championship Wrestling.
So we have got our final lethal lottery matches: Sting and Steve Dr. Death Williams against Eric Watts and Jushin Liger.
This is the most 1992 WCW match that has ever happened. This is everything good and everything bad. It is a potpourri. It is beluga caviar mixed with shite. It is beautiful. It is awful. It is everything I love to see.
It's the old All Japan, New Japan political dilemma that we had in previous years. So we basically know, going back to what I was saying there about Too Cold Scorpio being the only person who could lose the match. We basically know that someone's beating Eric Watts in this one, don't we? And it also means that Steve Dr. Death Williams has got to participate in this match before challenging for the WCW World Heavyweight title. All of the champions are fresh as a daisy because none of the champions are in this, only the challengers. We start with Sting v Liger. See, we've seen plenty of Sting v Luger. This is Sting v Liger, another interesting matchup. We then switch to Williams v Watts, and you can see that Williams is literally having none of Watts' shit. Watts just looks so awkward even when doing something like running the ropes. Williams is not interested in selling anything for New Japan's Liger either, and steamrolls him with a huge running clothesline. Sting takes over on Liger, and it's funny to hear Ventura on commentary say how Liger and Watts can't communicate when Liger lived in the UK for the best part of a year, only about 3 years previous to this, and he can speak perfectly passable English in reality. Liger avoids the Stinger splash. Sting immediately tags out to recover, which is a nice spot. Sting and Williams are then making frequent tags and targeting Liger, which also means Watts isn't involved in the match. Liger tries a sleeper. Williams counters within seconds with a belly-to-back suplex, who's still not selling anything for Liger. Liger manages finally to tag out to Watts, who promptly takes a stiff forearm to the face from Williams. Watts then fucks up a simple drop kick. He tries to clamp on the STF, but Williams gets to the ropes immediately. Watts charges in at Williams, who picks him up, drops him throat first over the top rope, pretty much like Steve Austin's stun gun. And he gets the pinfall in 9 minutes and 8 seconds. So we know that now the 8 men who will fight in the Battle Bowl to end the evening will be Van Hammer, Dan Spivey, Dustin Rhodes, Big Van Vader, Barry Windham, the Great Mutar, Sting, and Steve Williams. And 5 of these 8 men will be wrestling 3 times on this pay-per-view. Chris, the final match of the Lethal Lottery. What did you think of this one?
I don't know. I mean, it's as when I first watched it, I didn't understand I didn't know anything about the politics of All Japan and New Japan, and on the one hand, it's very easy now to go, well, Eric Watts is definitely losing this one, but then again, he's the boss's dad in 1992, and that it wouldn't have surprised me that much if they at least not have him lose, but. This was out of the 4 matches, the 4 tag matches. This is one I enjoyed the least. It wasn't terrible. It had its few moments here or there, but it felt like, you know how we said Dustin Rhodes kind of embraced that aggression. Didn't feel like Sting did. Sting doesn't have much of a poker. I think that's why he's got his face paint, because otherwise his poker face would be just the shits. He just didn't look like he cared, and everything kind of it was just going through the motions. And the thing that sort of disappointed me was, considering how excited I was to see Liger, because Liger and Pillman were tearing the house down, and Liger was doing everything. He didn't do very much that was very exciting. Maybe he was hurt. Maybe there's another reason, but he didn't seem to get a chance to do any of his flying.
No, he just sold,
the big guys.
Yeah, the whole match.
He sold, and he threw a few kicks. And bless JR going, he's kicking right to the heart. It's like, okay. It looked like one of the Power Rangers was waiting for the other four to arrive so they could tackle the big bad when he was in there with Dr. Death. But yeah, and Steve Williams, it didn't feel like I was never really blown away by Steve Williams when I saw him in WCW, but he didn't seem to pull out any of his big guns. You know, you weren't seeing him hit Dr. Bombs, or you wanted to see him throw someone into the sun, basically. You wanted to see him press someone into the air and yawn while he did it, and we didn't get much of that. And I also, the thing, and with hindsight, with Eric Watts, poor guy was cursed from the start. But to hear also that apparently he is mental and legitimately hard as nails. This guy who genuinely has been a problem getting into fights all his life, who doesn't look like he knows how to walk. He looks like he'd fail a field sobriety test, you know, just moving around the ring. And yet apparently this is the guy who, maybe with Steve Williams aside, could probably batter the other ones most easily. So you know,
I didn't know that.
Okay. Apparently so. Apparently he is. He was a nutcase, and yeah.
But the thing that really surprised me about this, and I'm sure this will resonate with you as a booker as well, Chris, is that if they were going to have these guys in these matches, they could have actually worked it into the story of the show. So, for example, you could have maybe the Great Muta, or maybe one of Wyndham and Pillman, like pick up a minor injury during the match, like a little accident or something, that then they've got to carry that into the match with them for their title match. They're carrying that knock, or even like you say with Steve Dr. Death Williams, he pins Watts with a doctor bomb while yawning, optional. And then that can play into the match with Ron Simmons. Maybe he goes for that move, or he tries to go for that move, and you've already put it across in that show as a move that can win a match. But they didn't do any of that.
Without a doubt, that idea of it felt very disconnected. And rather than telling the show long thread, as you said, just even if he'd hit that stun gun on Ron Simmons and Ron had kicked out, that would have probably gotten a reaction. So there wasn't really any callback to it, other than the moonsault. So obviously Muta won with a moonsault, then he used it in the match, but it's Muta. He does a moonsault.
Yeah, but it was like we've got 3 separate shows pasted together, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Liam, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this definitely wasn't much fun to watch, and yet I had a very, very close encounter with something that would have made it all worthwhile, because at first I did have this thought that there was a lovely little hidden highlight of character depth where, you know, Sting and Williams are playing a de facto hillside in this. And Sting is like the top babyface who's about to go up against Big Van Vader. You know, he's been given the big introduction, you know, as part of that 7 minutes and 15 seconds of guff. And here he is kind of on the hillside. And there was this little moment where I think Williams was choking someone on the ropes. And it was kind of near to their corner. And Sting has kind of slowly wandered along the apron over to where the opponent was, whichever one of the two it was. And he made you wonder: is he gonna cheat here? Is he gonna do something a bit underhanded for the sake of the team? Is he going to take what Dustin Rhodes did with Vader one step further? And then he wandered back, and it makes you think: oh, maybe he kind of it crossed his mind under under the circumstances, but because he's Sting, he thought, no, 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 I can't do this. So I kind of dug that, and then it occurred to me that yes, he's just probably phoning it in so much that he's just wandered along the apron without thinking. Kind of like how we go to the toilet twice in 5 minutes at work because we're so bored, even though there's absolutely nothing to empty out the second time. I think that's exactly what Sting has done, but it was kind of masquerading for a moment as a potentially really nice little hidden highlight. But yeah, I don't think it really was intended to be that. But the one thing I really did like that came out of this match, and we didn't actually get the benefit of it, the dividends, until a later match, was that here we've got Sting versus Liger, which is a dream interaction. You can tell by the reactions of the crowd that they like this pair and they like to see more of this down the road. They do a couple of exchanges, and that seems to be it. And then later on in his match with Vader, Sting busts out a Coppo kick.
He does indeed, yes.
And that is the sort of thing I'm here for all day long. So, but yeah, it doesn't really make this particular match any better. This match still sucks.
I think without this match, our chum Matthew wouldn't have a gimmick. I think Botchamania was born in that drop kick, that Eric Watts drop kick. I think if someone was to sell an NFT of the very first botch gif, there'd be $500,000 worth of Eric Watts hitting a drop kick.
Yep. This was a viral sensation before the video era or anything like that. I remember things like RSPW. We've had Scott Keith on as a guest, haven't we, Dean? And
yes.
That whole dark underbelly of the wrestling community was big on that Eric Watts drop kick. It was right up there with the Mutar scale and other such. What we didn't know at the time, but they were memes. But we didn't have the term memes at the time. They were 1990s memes before memes were a thing.
Well, I'll tell you something. Genuinely, when I was watching this, and I'm watching Eric Watts, and then I'm see that drop kick, the internal monologue that we all have with ourselves, I had, oh my God, this is awful. Why the fuck is he on pay-per-view? Followed by about 2 seconds later, oh yeah, I remember now. It did just take a couple of seconds for it to drop into my head. His dad's the boss.
They really, really hammered it, because I remember from sort of watching it, and they shifted WCW Pro all around the schedules, and you see it some weeks, and it was worldwide, and I remember them really getting behind Eric Watts for some reason, and sort of showing him training, and it's like rookie sensation Eric Watts, rookie sensation Eric Watts. He's the next big thing. Trouble is, they had just done exactly the same thing with Marcus Alexander Bagwell. He had been the rookie of the year, and they brought out this good-looking, okay wrestler, kept turkey everyone how great he was, what a great rookie he was. Everyone thought he was a twat. Everyone hated him. Everyone wanted to see him murdered. And it wasn't until he became Buff the Stuff, and the girls, in fact, could not get enough, that he kind of found his way into something else.
And that was years and years later, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, God blesses everyone, the American males in the interim. Good times. Good times. And if it isn't looping in your head, you're not a fan. Right now.
Don't worry, we're doing we're doing the watch-alongs, and they are on every other episode at the minute. So we have no choice; it's unavoidable.
Yeah. Oh man.
Although I just like I didn't want to go on too much about the music this one, but the lyrics in wrestling music is tremendous. They're tremendous, and there's some brave rhymes on the Slam Jam album that come along in this one, but my favourite line at the American Males one maybe doesn't hold up too well nowadays. With the if you see them come, you better run for cover. You girls don't want a part-time lover. It's like, you want to run away from them. Are they? It feels slightly predatory. Run for cover.
Slightly.
Hi, it's the American Males.
But it wasn't just the WCW did that, because I always remember there was WWF did an album as well. And I can't remember what the album was called, but it was at the time that they did the Slam Jam single, in '92, and they released a whole album of this. And everyone did a song, like Bret Hart had some like love song ballad for some.
Never been a good time to say goodbye. I had that album.
But I always remember there was a song from Tatanka, and it had the rhyme was something like, "I'm fighting for the Native American nation here in the World Wrestling Federation."
At least it rhymes.
At least
you know?
it rhymed, but
At
it
least
was
it
just...
rhymes. And someone took at least an afternoon on that.
Oh God! Right.
Tatanka, Buffalo.
Yes, Tatanka Buffalo. Or as Andre Baker said when he hired him for Hammerlock, his name means buffalo because he charges a lot, which I thought was magnificent.
Very good.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Right, so that's the first segment, should we say, of Starrcade done and dusted, the Lethal Lottery. It's now time for our fifth match, which is the NWA World Heavyweight title. And as we are told many times during this commentary, that this is the first time two Japanese wrestlers have fought for this title on American soil. It's the Great Muta versus the champion Masahiro Chono. Now, if you've listened to episode 16, way back with Dave Doyle was our guest, we reviewed Halloween Havoc 92, so the pay-per-view before this. And we had a match which on paper should have been great, shouldn't it, Liam? Masahiro Chono against Rick Rude. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
Well, actually, it turns out everything.
Fucking everything. Oh Christ on a bike! It was dreadful. We basically just was Dave live at that show? Is that why he chose that one?
Yes, that's exactly why he chose it.
Yeah.
He made the trek down from Boston to it was a Philadelphia show, wasn't it? Because Blue Meanie was there in the front row as well. Friend of the podcast, Blue Meanie was there. And yeah, he and his family wrote a complaint, didn't they, to Bill Watts about the product, and got
he got a reply.
a very half-assed mail merged reply and some merchandise. He said, I think.
Yeah, probably a Halloween Havoc 92 T-shirt to
remind him. Yeah.
Shit show he had to endure.
Yes. We're very, very sorry. Here's a coal miner's glove we have got lying around
that we'll never use again. Yeah. So Larry Zbyszko's take on this is that Muta has nicely warmed up with his Lethal Lottery match, which was only 2 matches ago. And as we've mentioned, Japanese wrestlers do seem to have a habit of underperforming in America. So let's hope this is better than the last time Chono was on pay-per-view. It's a cagey start. The first big offensive move is an enziguri by Chono, which sends Muta sliding out of the ring to regroup. It's all mat work to start with Chono focusing on Muta's left arm for the early portion of the match. It's certainly lacking the chaos of Muta's matches in Japan at this moment in time. Muta counters with the head scissors. Still very little is happening. It's been performed to a pretty much silent crowd, but then Chono slams Muta and goes to the top, but he's intercepted by Muta, who executes a superplex to a small pop from the crowd. We're then back to the traditional racism on commentary whenever we have a Japanese wrestler on, because Ventura alleges that a Boston crab is called a Hiroshima crab in Japan. It isn't, by the way. It's called a Boston crab because that's the name of the move. Muta clamps on his trademark bridging Indian deathlock chinlock combo. He sends Chono out of the ring with a spinning kick, but he doesn't follow things up. He then hits his handspring elbow, but even that only gets a mild reaction. Muta misses a moonsault, but he lands on his feet but sells his left knee, and Chono goes straight for it with kicks. They then both miss simultaneous drop kicks. We appear to have a bit of a stalemate as both men are looking very weary. Muta counters a belly's back suplex by converting it into a cross body, but gets a very close 2 count, which commentators react to more than the crowd do. But then Muta misses a drop kick. Chono locks in the STF in the center of the ring and gets the submission victory to retain the title in 12 minutes and 49 seconds. What were your thoughts on this one, Chris? Was it a plus? Was it a minus?
Do you know, I remember sort of getting quite excited about this because I'd seen I'd seen pictures of the Great Muta, but I'd never really watched him wrestle. And there was also this kind of Japanese wrestlers are really, really good. I can't wait. and I found it a bit boring at the time. And watching it now, I didn't find it as boring as I did then, because I think I've got a better appreciation for the sort of wrestling side of things.
Yeah.
But the real challenge here is Muta. There were not, neither one of them was one thing or another. Neither one of them really connected, in the sense that when because what was it, 89, 1991, 92, 3 years it had been really since Muta had been sort of a big part of WCW.
Yeah.
So it's quite possible that no one really knew who he was, or at least kind of knew in passing, especially because then you didn't have the same access to footage and videos and what have you.
Yeah.
And then Chono came out, and I love Chono now. I love him just from his presence as much as he looked like a badass. He's a guy who doesn't give a shit. You know, he's like an end-of-level boss on a Yakuza game. You know, that's what he looks like. But at this point, he was just a bloke in slightly odd-coloured tights with a bit of a beard. And there was no one to root for, no one to root against. They didn't do anything really, really flashy. And the mat wrestling's good. And, it's nothing bad, but it was two wrestlers that no one really knows, who wasn't giving them a reason to care. And that's like, if you compare it to Sasaki, who had his moment at the expense of someone everyone knew when he suplexed Vader. It was all right, I think, but I'm surprised it was only 12 minutes, because it felt longer.
It dragged, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, Liam, is it fair to say that, especially with this match where it's two Japanese guys against each other, obviously two guys who are very familiar with each other, that it's a matter of know your audience, and they have done a Japanese style match to an American crowd?
I think that is true to an extent, but what we've also got to remember is when we endured that tag tournament at Great American Bash '92, that tournament didn't have the same problems. There was a lot of well-known wrestlers there, guys who were well versed in the American wrestling style, American wrestling crowds, and they were going out there and having proper athletic, realistic, competitive matches, and it bored our socks off, and it bores most people who have to watch the majority of that pay-per-view, with the exception, of course, of Sting Vader in the title match. I think we made a reference in that review. We said that, Bill Watts wants to make it sporting, realistic, lifelike. But if you want it to be like real sport contains things like West Brom 0, Crystal Palace 0. It has absolute dog matches between two teams no one wants to really watch. Not everything is the Champions League final with Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi involved.
Mm-hmm.
And with this situation, they are jettisoning genuine chances to give the crowd a show. And this is the thing that really stuck out to me that backs this point up. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but they did not do this match to dead silence and hands underneath bottoms. There were little moments where certain moves got little pops. Certain, particularly crisp and athletic exchanges, kind of got a little bit of electricity out of the first few rows. The crowd were there for the taking. They wanted to engage. No, I've honestly I honestly thought throughout the whole match there were just little smatterings, little pockets of reactions that the crowd was there. If they reached out into that crowd and pulled them into the match, they would have had them, but they didn't do that. So it's not like they were like sent out there on DOA. They could have done something there, and they obviously just didn't have the right assignment.
I think you've hit something on it. It made me think. This felt like a monotone match. It felt like with like one or two little spikes, it was the same pace all the way through. And if and it wouldn't surprise me, I think, with the Bill Watts thing, if his instruction to them was go out there and have a solid match, have an athletic match. And wrestling it is about athleticism, but it's also about, as a great man said, it is about embellishment, sir. It's the art of embellishment. It's about larger than life. And if they'd given them a couple of moments, or they'd gone in hard and heavy, or had a couple of big strike exchanges, or let's say Chono had just decided to be a dickhead, that would have given them something. But I think you're right, Liam. There were moments where they went, oh, okay. And they did come up for the finish. They reacted for the finish.
See, the two things that I noticed about this, or two thoughts I have. One is that the crowd seemed to react a lot more when they're at a vertical base. All the time that they're on the mat, the crowd were pretty silent, and then they picked up for the vertical base, the power moves, the impact moves. But the other thing is, and I touched on this in my earlier notes when I said about that it lacked the chaos, and this goes back to what you were just saying, Chris. That you look at, I mean, one of my favourite matches of all time, anywhere in the world, is it's from, I can't remember the exact year, but it's from the Tokyo Dome. It's from the early '90s, and it's Jushin Liger and the Great Muta, and it's where we get the introduction of the very rarely seen character Kishin Liger, which is where Liger gets his mask ripped off, and underneath the mask he has got Muta style face paint and paint on his chest as well, and the crowd absolutely lose their shit because they've never seen anything like it. But during that match, you have got Muta doing crazy things, smacking him about with a chair and things like that, which is, you wouldn't expect that from Keiji Muto, but this isn't Keiji Muto. This is the Great Muta. This is his alter ego. This is the demon to Finn Balor. And if you had Great Muta spraying mist, even if he tried to spray and missed him, but if he went for the mist, if he grabbed a chair and the ref stopped him using it or something, that would have made it a bit different. But maybe it wasn't in the it wasn't the reverence of the NWA World Title or something. I don't know.
It's like he wrestled. I think you hit it again. It's a Keiji Muto match, and this was a time you didn't see a lot of mannerisms out of Muto either. There was no, even his sort of aside from doing a little bit of his sort of walk to the ring where he's stalking a little bit, there was none of that here. There was no mist. There was no, and I think an American audience, do you know what they want? They see Great Muta. What do they want to see? Handspring elbow, moonsault, elbow, a kick, and the mist. That's it. And they got two of those.
Yeah. And I think it didn't help that because he'd already been in a match, he didn't have his entrance gear on that always looks great as well. Yeah. Oh dear. Okay, so moving on, we're then told that Jim Ross, we're told via Jim Ross that if Rick Rude is unable to defend his US title by January the 23rd, he'll be stripped of the title. And then what I think is amazing is, without any introduction, without any music or anything, you can tell Rick Rude has made his appearance because there's just a massive chorus of boos for no apparent reason as he walks down the ramp, stands behind the commentators and cuts an awesome, unplanned, in inverted commas, promo. He also mentions how Sting wasn't stripped of the world title earlier this year when Vader broke his ribs, which is a very good point, but also highlights WCW being WCW. Rude had actually legitimately got bulging discs in his back and did end up vacating the belt, and Dustin Rhodes won a tournament to become the new champion. So this wasn't the career-ending back injury that he that he got in Japan, but I don't know if this contributed to it. But certainly, I mean, you're a man who teaches promos. It was a good promo.
It was beautiful. It was wonderful. And for Rick Rude, whose promos were often very stylized, very kind of in character, it felt real. It felt like there was real emotion behind it.
He sounds and feels angry, doesn't he?
Angry. And the two things that is that, especially watching it now, there was no hesitation. It was passion. All the stuff that Randy Orton talked about recently on the Stone Cold podcast about feeling it, I think, is what came through there. This is a man who was genuinely angry and genuinely frustrated, genuinely a bit mental, and also, I'm not ready to see him without moustache. That makes me slightly uncomfortable.
It was weird, wasn't it?
It was weird. It was weird seeing his top lip, but it was as chiseled as a top lip as you'll ever see. But I've often wondered about this, and it's one of those things that I wish I had people to reach out to. I wish I had people, because I think that a lot of that passion came from that. I reckon Rick was going to become world champion
Well,
I
know
yeah.
that they were running out of time for Ron Simmons. I think they realised that the experiment hadn't worked. So whether Rick Rude was going to get that here, because Vader won the belt 2 days after this show, so it does make you think that they wanted to get the belt off Simmons, but obviously not to put on Steve Williams.
Yeah, because Rick Rude, like you said, the boos that he got, the reaction he got from coming out, and one of my favourite moments in all of wrestling happened in '92, Super Brawl '92, when Rude was doing his pre-match spiel against Ricky Steamboat, and the crowd drowned him out.
He tries about 3 times, doesn't he?
It's amazing. He was the superstar heel in WCW.
Yeah,
and especially, I mean, as someone who kind of knew him from WWF as well, he was the guy who went, oh, this guy's a big deal. And it wouldn't surprise me if him being taken out of that cost him the world title, which he never really went on to get.
Hence
so
the anger.
The real emotion there, I reckon, I don't know for sure. Plans changed, but I reckon they were going to put the big one on him that night, and it just didn't happen.
That is such a good point. I think you might be absolutely bang on the money there. Yeah, and do you know what? There's the only other person that I can think of that in recent times I've seen get that kind of heat on a promo, Zach Gibson.
Oh, I don't. We don't deserve Zach Gibson.
Absolutely tremendous. Yeah, the heat that man can get is amazing. He is going to get even bigger than he is already. Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to match number 6. It is for the WCW World Heavyweight title. Steve Dr. Death Williams challenging Ron Simmons. And it feels bizarre to have the World Heavyweight title match in the middle of the show before the tag title match or the King of Cable tournament final. But maybe it shows how over Ron Simmons was as world champion. I don't know. He comes out to his slam jam music, bizarrely called Don't Step to Ron, whatever that means.
It means do not challenge him.
Oh. Then he'd be champion forever. What a strategy.
Yes. Do not invade my personal space was not as successful or succinct as a title. Ron Simmons, new entrance music, boundaries. It doesn't scan quite the same way. Yeah.
I see. Well, we start with a handshake, a handshake even, which Simmons resists. Do you know what? I'm going to start. I think I'm going to start that sentence again and try not to have a stroke in the meantime. We start with a handshake, which Simmons hesitantly accepts. And as a British wrestling fan, I do find it strange that he doesn't first look to the audience and ask, "Shall I?" Which we have all grown up with in this country. Given that Williams' previous WCW outings under Bill Watts were like, I'm concerned this is going to be dull as ditch water, but let's give it a go. They get down in matching 3-point stances and run into each other in a bit of a stalemate, but Simmons then levels Williams with a clothesline to a decent pop. It breaks down into a slugfest, and the crowd are responding to the moves on a vertical base. Simmons goes to the top for a shoulder block, but Williams sidesteps him, and Simmons is now in trouble. Williams starts working over Simmons' leg, and each time Simmons gets back up to that vertical base, Williams kicks his leg, and Simmons drops to the canvas. Williams slams Simmons and gets into a 3-point stance again, charging into his bad knee twice. But on the third attempt, Simmons catches him with a clothesline followed by a spine buster. He counters with a 3-point stance of his own and a charge into Williams' knee as he suddenly forgets to sell his own bad leg. Williams dodges another Simmons charge and Simmons falls to the floor. Williams follows him out and they brawl to ringside. Nick Patrick counts them both out at 15 minutes and 12 seconds as they carry on brawling outside and then inside the ring. And then despite them both fighting, Nick Patrick disqualifies Williams for coming off the top rope with a knee drop to the back of the head of Simmons, which was still knee drops off the top was still illegal at this point in time under Bill Watts. And he awards the match to Simmons, which Jesse Ventura goes mental at because he says that they've changed the decision already. I'm kind of guessing All Japan politics wouldn't allow Williams to get pinned, hence the lame finish and the position on the card now makes sense. This would be Simmons' last successful title defense. As I said, he'd lose the title to Vader just 2 days later at a house show in Baltimore, the exact same place that Simmons won the title himself back in August. Chris, what do you make of this one?
Do you know what? I enjoyed it more now than I did then. Again, I think. I think we needed more. I wanted it to be more like Vader and the Barbarian. I wanted to see two big dudes just batter each other. You know, you sort of like the way we see Walter doing it nowadays. Just sort of a big guy just pummels, clatter each other. It was all right. It was fun. It had its moments. It felt like it was just get it done, get it out of the way. And I think I was wondering why of all people do they protect Steve Williams at the expense of their world heavyweight champion? And then you mentioned All Japan, and it all kind of makes sense. And also because Eric Watts' dad, rather, Bill Watts probably probably had some sort of plan for Steve Williams. But here's a theory. Here's something that occurred to me, right? Again, if I reckon with the match placement on the card, Rick Rude and Ron Simmons could have properly main evented the show. I think that would have been the main event. So I can see why maybe they'd move it around. But if instead of Steve Williams, they put Steve Austin in this match and had stunning Steve Austin versus Ron Simmons, they could have had Steve Austin back when he was bumping like a motherfucker. Yeah. Had him I think he'd have been a perfect foil for Ron Simmons in this match, and Ron could have had a big clean win with a big clean power move, and it would have been cool as opposed to a bit of a, because Liam, you were saying earlier on, the crowd want to enjoy themselves, but they've been given quite a lot of oh, okay, I think this was another one of those, but yeah, that was just my thought. It was fun, and you got a little bit of Dr. Death and Ron running into each other, which again makes me very happy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is not a case of a dead town, dead crowd. This crowd have shown across the span of this pay-per-view, they've shown multiple instances where they are there for the taking. They are willing to strap themselves up for the ride, and I think we said similar things about Great American Bash, and it's pretty much the trend of the entire Bill Watts run in WCW. He doesn't want to because he wants an authentic sporting thing, where people wrestle 3 times and 2 of their matches run concurrently. A really realistic, authentic experience. It's just such a mess, and as a result, they are leaving. You guys have heard the expression leaving money on the table, and they're doing that really because it's a business after all. But they are, even just on this night, they are literally leaving fans' emotions on the table. They have come here ready to do their throats coarse with screaming and shouting and getting involved. And I don't think I've ever actually attended. I've definitely attended a few football games, which is probably why I'm making so many football analogies that are like this. But I'm trying to think, have I ever actually attended a live wrestling show where I've gone in there amped and ready to just completely lose myself and lose my voice and have a thumping headache as I walk out of the arena, and yet they just do absolutely nothing with me. I don't think I've been that unfortunate, thankfully.
But I think the point you made, and it's a really valid point, Lee, about football is a legitimate sport, not a worked sport, and therefore you will get a terminally boring 0-0 draw sometimes. Mm-hmm. But the reason, going back to the early 1900s, the reason that wrestling was worked in the first place was because people don't want to see that. So you, by the beauty of having a worked sport, you can eliminate them and make sure that your outcomes and your matches are exciting.
Absolutely. We do not come to wrestling for sport. Let's get this way in the whole debate, in the whole debate of where does it fall when it comes to sport? Is it sport? And obviously it has elements, but wrestling fans go to wrestling for the theatre, but we like it to come in a nice sporting package.
Yeah, I mean,
and to carry the elements.
Yeah, case in point, my other half, absolutely, she hates sport. She has absolutely no interest in any sport. She finds, I've had the World Snooker Championships on for the last couple of weeks. She's found that terminally boring. The same with football. Boxing and UFC actually makes her angry because they punch each other and trying to hurt each other. But she has no interest in sport. Wrestling, loves it because it's not sport, it's theatre. Exactly. And I think that's why we're going off on a massive tangent now. But
that's the idea of the podcast, Dino.
the fact that the British Parliament has recently recommended classifying wrestling training as sport, where you are learning a skill, and the wrestling shows themselves as theatre, makes absolutely perfect sense to me.
Yeah, it's for Bill Watts. This whole year of WCW spent. In fact, you know what? NWA, it spent years and years trying to be WWF, trying to be something else, trying to figure out what it was as a competitor, rather than just being something different, being an alternative. So there were all these attempts to, and that's why I have a bit more patience maybe for the throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. They've got WrestleMania. Okay, we'll try and do something different. But if you can't be better, it's a DDPism, name drop. If you can't be better, be different. And it was a procession of people who came in and I've got the answer. But none of them gave the audience what they wanted. They gave the audience what they liked. So you had Kip Fry or whoever it was trying to make Ric Flair into a gladiator. You had Bill Watts who wanted everyone to wear wool tights and not come off the top rope and get rid of the mats at ringside and all of that, because that's what he liked. And it went so well that he had to dial it all back. And then he sucked all the moments, because it's moments. Moments make wrestling. They're the bits, It was I don't remember the match, but I remembered Barbarian and Vader clattering each other. That's the kind of shit. And you had so much of that tonight where it was clearly one person's vision going, no, this is how it should be. I don't care what they want. And you've got to find that balance.
Definitely. Definitely. And yeah, the direction that a company goes in is always going to be down to the booker's vision. But yeah, at the same time, the booker needs to be able to gauge what his audience are telling him from their reactions.
Yeah, I'm, and you've said this to me as a booker. We don't need to name names, but I'm sure I've had wrestlers at Future Shot that I booked that I didn't particularly rate or enjoy, but I knew that people liked watching them and they would draw. And I'm sure you've had instances as well like that where you've gone, not my thing, but I know they've got a place. And it's putting your own ego aside and going, it's not all about me.
Yeah,
I mean, it is, obviously, but it's
not. Okay, so we then have a promo for Super Bowl 3, which comes up in February. We have already reviewed this, I do believe, and this is where Eric Watts gets unmercifully booed by the crowd because his dad's gone. It's time for our final title match. Before that, we see an incident where Barry Windham smacked both Shane Douglas and Ricky Steamboat from behind with a chair while they were doing an interview on TV. So this is for the unified NWA and WCW World Tag Team titles. Barry Windham and Brian Pillman challenging Shane Douglas and Ricky Steamboat. So let's get this timeline straight, Liam. Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes had beaten Williams and Gordy for the world titles, but then they defended against Steamboat and Douglas. There was some miscommunication where Steamboat got accidentally low blowed and Dustin Rhodes refused to make a cover on him while he was injured, and that led to Windham turning on Rhodes, I believe, and the team split up and Rhodes went heel.
Yeah, Windham was going absolutely mental on the apron, wasn't he? That he wasn't getting the job done and taking advantage
Windham
of
went
it.
heel, not Rhodes. Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, there's that backstory. You remember that Clash of the Champions we reviewed very recently, where the Dangerous Alliance took out Windham for a little bit, and the team of Windham and Rhodes had Steamboat coming, making his big return. Such a good match we covered there.
Yes.
So there's that interlocked situation between them, and I think the friendly challenge was issued by Steamboat because of the history and babyface versus babyface title matches never quite go to plan, do they? So now we've got this. Now we've got this offshoot, and as we said, we're seeing the progression of the characters here because Windham has a new tag partner who he thinks is more along the lines of what he can mould, because Pillman has shown frustrations at the tail end of the light heavyweight division, little hints I believe at going full heel, so he thinks he's someone he can shape a little bit more, but in the end he'd abandon the whole tag team idea and become the lone wolf. And as we said earlier, Pillman would find a better partner and would go on to do great things for less than a year until WCW split them up because WCW.
Yes. So both teams come out to their slam jam tunes. Yeah, Pillman, as you said, Liam, not a fully fledged heel right now, but he's stopped dyeing his hair blonde. He's still wearing his Bengal tiger print trunks. The babyfaces start off in control of both their opponents, but there's a staggering lack of crowd heat, even as Douglas tries to do the typical babyface firing up the crowd arm pump. You know what I mean. It feels like the previous match has killed the crowd a bit. The Steamboat comes into a slightly better reaction. He clotheslines Wyndham over the top as Wyndham takes a great bump. Then he slams Wyndham on the floor of the Omni. Jim Ross explains how there's an ice hockey rink underneath, which makes the floor hard and cold. And I can tell you, having worked shows at the Coventry Sky Dome, which is the same setup, it is absolutely true. If you put your hand on the floor, it's freezing.
I thought you were going to say hard and cold. And as someone who's worked in Coventry, I can tell you that the audiences in Coventry are indeed hard and cold.
And as someone who worked in Coventry, it took me fucking ages to work out how you get off the bloody ring road. Wyndham gets slammed on the ramp by Douglas. The champions have singled out Wyndham until he counts the chinlock with a jawbreaker and tags out to Pillman. Pillman is on the apron and gets drop kicked to the guardrail by Douglas, and he takes a great bump to the floor. Douglas then goes to the top, gets distracted by Wyndham, and that gives Pillman time to drop kick him spectacularly off the top rope. Douglas falls to the floor. He then gets clotheslined by Wyndham for his troubles and put back in the ring, and now the challengers are working over Douglas and singling him out. Wyndham's punching Douglas on the floor. Steamboat gets his revenge on him by clocking Wyndham from behind with a chair to the back, and once again Ventura goes nuts on commentary because the wholesome Steamboat is using a steel chair. Douglas is still unable to tag out. He's selling all of his opponent's offense massively whilst just about kicking out, but the crowd still aren't responding too much. And you can actually see, if you look at the few rows that are visible, there is a lack of movement from people at the front who are visible. Douglas reverses a Wyndham suplex. He's finally able to tag out to Steamboat, who takes on both opponents. At least he gets a good pop coming in. Wyndham catches Steamboat with a desperation power slam. Pillman hits Douglas to bring him in and then throws Steamboat over the top rope while the referee's distracted, and Wyndham then runs Steamboat into the post. Wyndham and Steamboat both managed to tag out. Douglas has gone from barely conscious to the fresh man in a matter of about 3 minutes. Great tag team logic, but hey. Then all four men are in the ring. Steamboat crossbody blocks Wyndham. They both go over the top rope to the ramp. Pillman, meanwhile, runs at Douglas, who catches him in his trademark belly-to-belly suplex to get the title-retaining pinfall, while Steamboat prevents Wyndham from making the save in 20 minutes and 2 seconds. Finish got a really good response, and it's also worth noting that all of the champions who didn't have to wrestle a match in the Lethal Lottery retained their titles.
Yeah, what are the odds?
What are the odds? What do you think of this one?
Do you know what? This was using the 17-year-old Chris VHS rule. This was a part of the tape that I wore down because I thought it was a pretty tidy little tag team match. It was all action. It was a lot of fun. I didn't necessarily sort of clock things like the audience reaction and that. I just kind of had my blinkers on. I just saw what I saw.
Yeah.
And it was fun. Anytime you get Steamboat in there, anytime you've got some really good wrestlers in there, and even Shane Douglas at that point he didn't stink. You know, he was good enough. He was the sort of least experienced of the four, which is mad thinking of him as this fresh-faced, happy-go-lucky baby face compared to where he went later in his life. You know?
Yes.
And that's another mad thing. But the thing that really struck me at this point, thinking about it now with 2021 brain on, is how quickly the tag team division in WCW fell apart in 1992. Because even if you go back earlier in the year, you had the Steiner brothers, you had Doc and Gordy, you had Wyndham and Rhodes, who were sort of finding their way together as a team. You had the Freebirds, you had even Shanghai Pierce and Tex Slazenger. You had quite a lot of tag teams, and then what felt like over the course of a couple of months, Gordy left or got suspended. The Steiners left. The Freebirds broke up. Anderson and Eaton kind of went their own way. And all of a sudden, there were no tag teams apart from Tex Slicing during Shanghai Pierce, who, bless their heart,
And Harlem Heat
for nothing. Yeah, and that I think is kind of what hurt it, as well as the fact that they kind of just come off a bit of a bum finish. Is that there were 4 like singles guys, kind of all thrown together. It was 2 makeshift tag teams, and it was really good. But it was just like it felt very placeholdery. Like a lot of the stuff, it felt like a well. Steve Williams, shit, we better put someone with Ron. We'll put Steve Williams in there. Oh, we need a tag team championship match. We'll put these 4 guys in together. And it, especially because that was the thing that got me too, was the big blood feud here was Wyndham and Rhodes.
Yeah.
But they weren't involved in this match. So, you know, they had fun. And I really enjoyed it, you know, lingo mode on. 2 heats. How exciting. You know, they played around with the formula a little bit. It's also very Bill Watts to have a long tag team match, like 20 minutes plus. But yeah, this was fun. I liked it. I think that the audience. They don't get to see Rick Rude. They've had a bit of a non-finish. They've had some weird matches. They're kind of getting a bit like, okay.
I mean, yeah, I thought this was the best match of the night so far, just for the in-ring action. What were your thoughts, Liam?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. It really is a situation where they've taken that last liberty with this crowd that is there for the taking, as we've said all episode. And when they finally get a couple of matches with this one, the one that comes after it, that are really up there with what they'd sort of expect, you've got one that is played out to far too much silence, and especially considering how much of a reaction these sort of tag matches usually get, especially in this state. And then, yeah, we're about to have a match where the crowd reaction is definitely better, but it's still I think we've definitely heard louder Sting Vader reactions, which is a shame. But we've got to a point where they've really just taken the libbies and they've lost them. They've done their 7 minutes and 15 fucking seconds. They've done all they've done all sorts of, when they finally did get to the wrestling matches, you know, 7 minutes and 15 seconds later, they've taken all sorts of liberties with the fans first for entertainment and excitement, and they're finally starting to see what happens when you do that, and it's such a shame because, yeah, the second and the third matches off the top for me were absolutely what WCW was at its best.
Okay, well, this is, as you say, it's now time for the final of the King of Cable tournament, which was I was looking this up because I was thinking, what the hell? I remember it happening, but what the hell was it about? And this was basically to celebrate 20 years of professional wrestling on TBS Superstation. So what better way to celebrate wrestling on a TV channel than having the final on a pay-per-view?
Yeah. Was this the tournament that was sponsored by Super Nintendo? Because I remember from our days of watching WCW Worldwide on ITV like every week, I remember there was tracking this tournament sponsored by Super Nintendo. I don't know if it was this one. It may or may not have been.
I remember Jesse Ventura getting excited about, that's the 16-bit one. And immediately Jesse Ventura was cool.
There wasn't, because there's also the arm wrestling tournament, wasn't there?
Jesse's Strongest Arm tournament, yeah, which was apparently that was a shoot, brother.
But the great thing with this, how we've just talked about how they had all these wrestlers that weren't used, yet they paid to be on pay-per-view to sit in the dressing room. The King of Cable tournament was created to showcase WCW's top singles wrestlers at that time. There were 8 wrestlers in the tournament, but 15 names entered the tournament. So out of those 15 names, 8 were picked and 7 weren't. Rather than getting one more wrestler, just one more wrestler is all you needed to then make it a nice 16.
Why are they running WCW like it's PE from when I was a teenager? Why is that the case, that there's some poor fucker who has to go, mate, I'm not picked.
Well, the answer to your question, Chris, is in fact the title of this podcast.
Yes.
Because WCW.
Here's the thing that annoys me about all of this. A lot of, not everyone in the wrestling industry, but a lot of people in the wrestling industry, when fans take umbrage with basic logic flaws and stupidity like this and like some of the other things we've outlined here, there is such a big majority of the professional wrestling industry that views all of the gripes, even the ones as blatant as that one, like 15 men, 16-man tournament, they view all of them as comic book guy in the Simpsons episode with Poochie. That is, to them, it's just us being sad geeks who pick up on tiny little details rather than just let them fly through life without any checks and balances. But some of these, as you said, some of these are just so stupid that if you had great television shows on Netflix, some of the all-time great things like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad, if they had such ridiculous flaws in logic, especially very early on when they're still trying to get that audience, and WWE at this point are still very much trying to get that audience, and they never got it until 1996, they wouldn't have made it out the first season.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, if we could arrange like The Sopranos for WCWs to end mid-scene, that would have been fine. I think that would have been good for the 2001 Nitro. Just blank.
Could they have maybe done that like in the summer of 2000 and spared us all, and then come back on for Chavo Guerrero in the cruiserweight division in 2001, and then finised. But then just cut out 3-4 months of who booking WCW 2000.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, so match number 8 is the King of Cable tournament final. It is Big Van Vader versus Sting. The first thing to note is that Gary Michael Capetta announces this as being scheduled for TV time remaining, which is repeated by Jim Ross. But we've still got the Battle Bowl to go, so theoretically this match could go on and we never get our Battle Bowl.
But if we complain about it, we're just comic book guy in the Simpsons. Remember that?
Yeah. Worst podcast ever. Sting and Vader face off on the ramp. And as we've mentioned earlier, Harley Race looks resplendent in his tuxedo. But yeah, we know, you and I both know, Liam, he might be done up in a fancy tuxedo, but he's still going to take a bump during this match.
It is in his contract. And even though they have refused to mention it since the opening intro, it is the 10th anniversary of Starrcade. And judging by that suit, it really does mean something to Harley Race, damn it.
Harley still gives a shit.
You say that, but to be honest, would you be that surprised if Harley Race just wore a tux all of December? Just because he felt like it.
That checks out. Yep, logic checks out.
Yeah. And then he goes and does his shift at the Phoenix where he throws out drunks and then sings Sweet Caroline.
Yeah, and then goes home for a bowl of his famous chili.
Harley Race singing Sweet Caroline. That's one thing that we never got that we should have.
Good times never seem so good. So good, so good, so good.
Yeah, you've just reminded me of something. This is going to sound so stupid, but I remember once. Do you remember? You might remember this, Chris. Back in the mid-90s, there was a brand of coffee that had this really cringy advert called Mellow Birds.
Mellow Birds will make you smile.
Yes, and it was like coffee that wasn't bitter, and it was like it was like some housewife having a cup of this and go, oh, it's lovely, oh, it's not bitter at all. You've just suddenly put into my head the memory I've clearly repressed for about 25 years. I once had a dream where the Mellow Birds advert was done exactly as the advert was, but instead of the suburban housewife, it was Harley Race and Big Van Vader. Because I just remember in my head Harley Race standing up and going, it's not bitter at all. And then Vader getting up and doing his pose and just growling and stuff. And I've suddenly just remembered that. It's completely irrelevant to absolutely anything. But hopefully the Mellow Birds advert that I'm referring to can be found somewhere on YouTube. Anyway,
if there's anyone out there listening who has some sort of skill in dream analysis, please dissect this, because I feel that we need to know the underlying meaning.
the underlying meaning was I was watching too much wrestling, clearly. So yes, Sting defeated Brian Pillman and Rick Rude to get to the final, whilst Vader beat Tony Atlas, who I never even knew was in WCW, and Dustin Rhodes. I mean, imagine that you're a regular in WCW. No, you haven't been picked for this tournament. I'm afraid Tony Atlas has made it instead of you.
And Tony was backstage at Starrcade as well. He was in the locker room.
Raiding the shoe cupboard, yeah.
Of course. Don't you pink shame him.
Vader totally dominates the opening minutes of the match, not selling a thing for Sting and using slams, press slams, and that vertical splash again to send Sting out of the ring to catch his breath. Vader then misses 2 clotheslines and Sting knocks Vader down with, that Jushin Liger style Coppo kick, followed by a spectacular German suplex. A flying clothesline then sends both men to the floor and the crowd are absolutely lapping this up. Sting then hits a plancha onto both Vader and Racer. There is Harley's bump covered. Sting executes a modified superplex but only gets a 2 count. He then clamps on the Scorpion Deathlock, but he's too near the ropes and Vader breaks the hold. But it's now Sting in complete control of the match till he misses a Stinger splash on the outside and crashes into the guardrail. They go back into the ring and it's now Vader in complete control, hitting a short clothesline and his own version of a Stinger splash. A belly-to-back suplex is followed by a regular splash and Vader goes for the cover but pulls Sting up so tight that he rolls through and gets his shoulder up. Vader then shouts shit right in front of the camera as Jim Ross diplomatically comments that Vader is very frustrated with himself. I still don't know if that was like a legit a spot that was booked or just something that happens and he like went with it. I don't know. Sting ducks a clothesline, nearly pins Vader with a backslide, but Vader regains control with a couple of well-placed right hands to Sting's jaw. He then hoists Sting up onto the top rope, climbs up to meet him, but Sting fends him off and knocks Vader down to the canvas, but Sting's exhausted and is unable to take advantage. Then Vader's back in charge again, raining down forearm blows to Sting in the corner as he invites Vader to hit him some more. Sting then gets a second win, stops selling Vader's blows. He drops Vader with a series of discus punches and executes a Samoan drop and then lands a huge top rope splash for a close 2 count. This brings Harley Race up onto the apron to distract Sting and Vader clatters into him from behind. Vader lands a top rope splash of his own, but this momentum bounces him off RVD style and he can't make the cover. So he goes to the top again, but Sting catches him diving off the top rope into a power slam for the pinfall to a huge pop in 16 minutes and 50 seconds. So Sting wins the King of Cable tournament. And I'm pretty sure that this was also the same finish when Sting won the WCW World title from Vader in London a few months later that I was at. Anyway, seeing as Vader won the world title 2 days later, this win for Sting perfectly sets him up as the top contender for the title. So, Chris, it's Sting v Vader. You can't go wrong, can you?
Wonderful. That was everything they did with WCW in 1992 was we're back to the caviar mixed with bullshit. It's the stuff that was good was amazing, and the stuff that was bad was mind-boggling. You know, when you had the Dangerous Alliance at their peak, and you had the Steiners killing people, and Vader for me was like the fact that they made him a monster at the American Bash that you mentioned. Yeah. We just came in and murdered him. That's it, and he was a monster. And Sting was the star. And every match they had, Sting got a little more clever and figured out kind of how to deal with Vader. And it was even like when I stole liberally from these matches when I was booking Crater versus Ashton Smith in Future Shock. So that became their story across the matches that they had. It's you can't go wrong. And judging again by the fact the crowd going up, they're there to see the stars. And a lot of the stars were either in the locker room or injured, but they got to see Vader, who's a monster, and Sting, who's a superhero. Fucking this was Thanos and Steve Rogers, 30 years early. You know, it was brilliant, and just seeing Sting get those power moves on Vader was can't get enough of it.
And the reaction it gets from the crowd, we've seen a bit of a dead crowd the last couple of matches, but they certainly were alive again for this.
Absolutely up and rolling. and you can't not get it's a simple story told well. It's a big guy who will turn you into meat paste, and you have to fight back, and that's what they got. And this was the other Sting. Sting, I think, went and put on his caffeinated face paint.
Sting, who gives a shit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Liam. Yeah, we've said probably not as good as Bash 92, but what is?
Do you know what? I was giving that some thought, and here's the thing: like that Bash 92 match between Sting and Vader became the archetype of so many similar David Goliath style matches, especially one where you're actually going to book the bad guy to go over. That set the tone, and it was just so good in its own way. But much like anything that works in, let's say, like a trilogy or anything with sequels, I think it's a fool's errand to try to compare the first to the second like for like. You got to understand their respective stance in the whole sequence. And that's why this match for me stands out as just being so good, because it is the sequel to that match. It is the second big mainstream clash. All of the animosity that wasn't there the first time, even though I know they had their run-ins to hype up that Bash title fight, the feud simmered up to this point, and Sting was after revenge more so. He was more willing to tap into that dark side that we kind of almost saw a little bit in that tag match when he wandered over to the apron. And yes, I am still trying to convince myself that that's a subtle bit of storytelling. You can't convince me otherwise. But this match is every bit the worthy sequel. And if you think of how many, whether it's in wrestling, in sports, especially in TV and movies, how often the sequel struggles to make that next logical step.
Yeah.
They have done it here. And if you think about it, we then go on to Super Bowl 3 and the White Castle Fear strap match, which is an absolute violent belter, pardon the pun. And you are looking. I know Sting and Vader fought many times when all was said and done. But if you just take those three in particular on pay-per-view, you take Bash 92, Starrcade 92, Super Bowl 3. There's not many, other than a few obvious ones such as Flair and Steamboat. There's not many better trilogies in professional wrestling. It sounds like I'm using Schiavone hyperbole, but I am not.
No, definitely not. Totally agree. I mean, and also, the feud then continued with bringing tag partners in, because, we then had Vader teaming up with Sid Vicious. We had Sting teaming up with Davey Boy Smith, and then that allowed Davey Boy Smith to have a run at Vader himself. But
the two gravitated around each other. They were WCW perhaps more so than Sting and Flair were, who are another classic feud, but there was just the right ingredients were there for Sting and Vader. Whereas Sting and Flair was also awesome, but it was a little bit more on and off. It obviously had like phases, didn't it? You had the original early 90s go of it, and then they renewed hostilities. We've been tracking it with the watch-alongs on Nitro when the Horsemen reformed and turned on Sting, and obviously they started crossing paths a little bit again in, I want to say 99, just a little bit, and obviously that final match on the Nitro, it was more of a drip thing. But for me, I think we've discussed this before on the Vader tribute episode, Dean. Sting Vader is probably the most WCW. Of the...
and also, and this goes back to the sort of things that I'm sure you teach, Chris, that if you had someone who either wasn't a big wrestling fan, or someone who's never seen WCW before, if you show them Sting v Vader, they immediately can see who the babyface is and who the heel is. It's so obvious just looking at the two of them and the contrast between them.
Yeah, and also, just to add that little extra twist, did you spot Vader's do-rag?
Yes.
Waiting on the arm. Just that little thing, just Vader in a do-rag. Just, devil's in the detail.
And the other thing that kind of saddens and warms my heart and saddens my heart at the same time is the knowledge that the one person out of everyone in the wrestling business when Vader was literally on his deathbed in his dying days, the one man in the wrestling business who visited him more often than anyone else and looked after him was Sting. So there was a genuine bond between them through those matches.
I think again, Vader. I mean, Sting obviously was a hero. He was like the franchise guy in WCW, but his stuff with Vader, I think you bang on the money, Liam. And the more I think about it being a very WCW trilogy. So you think about Sting's first World Championship, kind of didn't go according to plan because he got hurt and it was delayed, and then all that kind of stuff. And then his second one initially was kind of derailed a bit because Luger was leaving and it didn't quite deliver. It didn't have that big moment. And it was him versus Vader that suddenly became, holy shit, this is important. This is a big deal. That gave him the mountain to climb. So, yeah, I think Vader really, because it's easy to forget now, 88, 89, 90, like over the space of 4 or 5 years, it was Vader who was the one who, Flair obviously was the first one to sort of sprinkle the stardust on him, but I think Vader legitimized him, like Foley did for Randy Orton. It made him look like a guy who'd go out there and have a fight. Also, yeah, and Mick Foley did that for Sting as well.
Cool. So we then have some very odd, and maybe I was saying it's odd because I know nothing about NFL, but we have this this thing about the Battle Bowl ring and comparing it to the Super Bowl ring. This whole thing about getting rings is clearly an American thing, because I've never heard of it in European sports. We give people medals and things, I suppose. But yeah, that you have this ring that you can keep forever, and they seem to be trying to compare the importance of a Battle Bowl ring with that of a Super Bowl ring, which doesn't quite ring true. But anyway, it's no. It's our last match of the night. It is the Battle Bowl. It's an 8-man battle royal. Dan Spivey, Dustin Rhodes, Great Mutar, Barry Windham, Steve Williams, Van Hammer, Big Van Vader, and Sting. So again, everyone comes out to the same generic music. Some people are coming out for the 3rd time tonight. Sting technically is coming out for the 4th time tonight. Muta has put fresh face paint on. Sting hasn't had time, obviously, because he was in the last match. He gets attacked by Vader on the rampway before he can even get into the ring. Windham and Rhodes go straight after each other, to go back to what we were talking about earlier. Sting and Vader pair off again. Interestingly, New Japan's Great Mutar and All Japan's Steve Williams pair off against each other, but at least Mutar is selling for Williams. There's not an awful lot going on for the first few minutes. People just mainly kicking and punching, with the occasional half-hearted attempt to leave someone over the top rope. Mutar saves the Sting from elimination, which Jesse Ventura can't understand because it's every man for himself. Van Hammer looks really out of place among all these other talents, and unsurprisingly, he's the first to be eliminated by Steve Williams. Meanwhile, Rhodes and Windham are fighting on the ramp. Rhodes lands a bulldog on the ramp to a big pop. Sting eliminates Spivey over the top rope, which the referee... from the top rope onto the ramp, which the referee states still counts, because this predates the old both feet touch the floor rule that we're all familiar with now. So we're down to 6. Vader tries to eliminate Mutar, but Sting returns the favour and saves Mutar. Vader then dives at Sting, and they both fall over the top rope to the ramp, eliminating each other, probably due to the fact they're absolutely knackered and can't be asked to carry on any longer. So our final 4 are Williams, Mutar, Rhodes, and Windham. Rhodes is the only man who hasn't wrestled 3 times. One thing I realise here is that how smart Steve Williams is. He's choking Mutar on the ropes right in the corner where the Japanese magazine photographers are, because he knows how good a photo that will make and how it will make him in All Japan look good. And also, he's not selling anything for Mutar, but he hasn't sold anything for anyone really this whole show. Windham is bleeding from the nose. Windham and Rhodes are jockeying for position by the rope, so Williams charges in to clothesline him over the top, but he manages to only catch Rhodes, and he sends Rhodes over the top rope, but his own momentum sends himself over the top rope as well. So basically, tonight, Steve Williams has lost the title match without being pinned and has then eliminated himself from a battle royal after not selling anything and choking a rival out in front of the Japanese photographers. So he's either a massive prick or the smartest man in the building.
Don't sell short. He beat the boss's son. Clean.
Of course, and he beat the boss's son. Yes. Either way, this would end up being his last match in WCW until 1999. So we are left with Muta and Wyndham. Wyndham tries to throw Muta over, but Muta grabs onto the top rope for dear life and won't let go. Wyndham lands a superplex followed by a standing drop kick, which, as Jim Ross says, is a phenomenal achievement for a man of his size, not to mention this late stage of the evening. He throws Muta over and turns his back, thinking he's won, but Muta skins the cat, gets back inside and lands a pair of drop kicks, the second of which sends Wyndham tumbling over the top rope. The great Muta wins Battlebowl 92 to a sizable reaction. I don't know, it took 14 minutes and 1 second, and I think there's a little bit of people happy that Muta's won, but I think there's a lot of it is people are happy that Barry Windham didn't win, basically, on this.
Yeah, he's the weird thing about this, having to put the battle royal on last. Here's your first challenge. Considering that a battle royal is supposedly a huge over the top thing, an 8-man battle royal is less about a spectacle and more about, let's say, early generation console limitations in a wrestling game. You know, it's that kind of feel of it's not a huge spectacle. And the big thing for me was the eliminations on the entrance ramp, which just feel lame. You know, it feels so anticlimactic because it just kind of happens, and there's this. Well, it's like wrestling's like a joke. If you have to explain it, it probably didn't work. And there were moments where Jim Ross was going, "Oh well, he's gone over the top rope. They've landed the ramp. Technically, that, you know, just don't throw them out on that side of the ring. You know, just you know." And yeah, it did again. I think this it's not the best tagline to sell a wrestling concept, but Battle Bowl, it doesn't outstay its welcome. You know, it's a passive aggressive / faint praise to the 9th degree, but it didn't outstay its welcome. It had plenty of action. My favourite bits, anything to do with Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes, just battering each other.
Yeah,
having that moment where two genuine rivals just went, right, we can get our mitts on each other for the first time. And yeah, they got rid of Van Hammer early. Fine, you know, you need someone has to be there to go out first. But yeah, it was fine, and I think that he got a reaction at the end. It felt very thrown together again, like a lot of this show for me.
Yeah. Also, the an 8-man battle royal in the world of sport era of wrestling in Britain. If you ever got a battle royal, it was 8 men. That was the most you ever got. I think probably because the tiny 14 by 14 foot rings that we had meant that anything more than that would be just chaotic. But yeah, I remember only ever seeing an 8-man battle royal. Then when watching WWF, and it's like a 20-man battle royal, a 30-man Royal Rumble. What is this lunacy? So
I mean, it's all right. They balanced it. They found their way back with World War III. They managed to let's go either very small or massive. It's like if you watch New Girls, it's that guy whose pranks are either too small or way over the top. There's nothing in the middle.
Nothing in the middle. I've just realised we have not, for some odd reason, Liam, no one has asked to cover one of the World War III pay-per-views yet.
No, we're too busy going top heavy on the early 90s. We've got so much from the latter years of those to catch up for. We're going to get to a point where I guess we'll have no choice but to. But I feel like that's
pencil me in at some point. I'll happily come and do a World War III.
That is assuming, Chris, that we ever do another podcast episode ever again, because now that we've had a Winnie the Bish reference, I don't think we can go past that. We've peaked. That is it. You have managed to get Winnie the Bish from New Girl into a reference, and that is it. We might as well stop now. Huge New Girl fan, so I was happy to hear that. But did I ever tell you guys about that time that Van Hammer main evented Starrcade? We're going to bury the lead here, aren't we? We've just managed to drag Bill Watts' strange fetish for authentic, old-timey sports out of the doldrums with two banging proper matches of a main event marketer with a world tag titles and a tournament final between two of the biggest stars, and yet we're not ending the pay-per-view. We're having this 8-man tussle. But aside of those criticisms, I've got to say I agree with the whole. Having a streamlined battle royal is a good idea, and as we find out, one of the greatest battle royals of all time, and I might have to say probably the one that got the highest ever star rating, was a 4-man battle royal.
Really?
There.
Yeah. You don't know what I'm talking about then, do you?
You're talking about Final Four.
Final Four was a battle royal.
Mm-hmm.
Because it had
What's it?
over the top rope elimination rules. I believe they may have said that pins and submissions count, but if I remember
Pins and
correctly,
submissions counted too. Yeah.
all of the eliminations were over the top rope, which makes sense
Yeah.
because it's 4 top guys, road to WrestleMania, and that was a 4-man battle royal, and it was an absolute banger of a match. So you can do that. The model in itself makes sense, but in this instance, with the amount of Bill Watts going on, basically, I'm turning it into a phrase, and the fact that it's having to go on last for no reason. No, they've squandered it. But yeah, if like, I made that reference very early on. If AEW were to run such a concept and they did the Battle Bowl finish rather than making it a lethal lottery tag tournament like TNA did, if they did that Battle Bowl element, absolutely do the. And obviously they had the what was it called, the Dynamite Diamond Ring, didn't they? Was that the front called?
Oh yeah, when
The MJF as one.
96 DDP did it. I love
Yeah.
their rings.
So yeah, but I think going back to that, I think they did that segment just to try and hammer home that the Battle Bowl is really important, which
Yeah.
it isn't, and people are just fed up that you're dragging this on beyond the real big 2 matches. So just creatively, and we've seen this a lot in WWE ever since WCW was bought out, ironically. But it's one of those instances where the efforts of the wrestlers was just hamstrung by the overall vision of creative here.
Yeah. And as Chris mentioned, just to bookend this, that WCW weren't done with the Battle Bowl concept either. They was it Slamboree '95. They had one as well, but Battle Bowl was actually brought back on its own for a pay-per-view in its own right in November 1993. Once they'd increased their pay-per-view schedule in the latter part of that year to doing something every month. And the 1993 Battle Bowl, which again, funnily enough, Liam, no one wants to cover with us, that was increased to a 32-man field, and the event was complete horseshit, with loads of tag teams happening to face off against each other, and Keith fucking Cole wrestling on pay-per-view. That was your Battle Bowl 93.
He was at least one of my favourite Cole twins. He was
in the top 2.
He was top 2.
It's good.
And also Charlie Norris.
Charlie Norris, Buffalo. When they went, they've got. We want a Tatanka. Can we have a Tatanka, please? They even had him be undefeated for a while. Whew, dark days. Dark days. Well, overall, Chris, what would you say for Starrcade 92? Is it a thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs in the middle?
I'm going to go thumbs up because there's. In the era of NXT takeovers, where like the ones they had just before WrestleMania, you've got 5 blasting matches one after the other. It's very easy to forget that in the 1990s, if you got 2 great matches on a show, it's a good show. So you had your tag match, you had your King of Cable match. The stuff that was great was really good. The other stuff, the stuff that was kind of Eagle versus Shark and a little bit of a sort of potpourri stuff didn't outstay its welcome. Eric Watts was shit, but in a funny way. So God bless him for helping to play Matthew's mortgage for however many years.
I suppose this is the era. We got to remember this is the era of the TV squash match. So seeing the real wrestlers, the superstar wrestlers, whatever you want to call them, face off against each other is still a novelty.
It is. It's a huge deal. It's like their version of Survivor Series, because that was a big deal. Seeing different people face up, or the Rumble, when you never got those matches. I mean, the first WCW match I ever saw. This is my Rain Man wrestling memory coming out. Was Heavy Metal Van Hammer versus Mark Kyle. Killer Kyle from Smoky Mountain. One with a slingshot suplex. Good times. But that was what the programming was. So getting to see even like Cactus Jack and Van Hammer in a ring together was a cut above what you'd normally see. So, yeah, I reckon it's worth it because I think it's the only time, because they rolled the dice on Lethal Lottery three times? Yeah. No, 4 times. All right. And this is the only time I think it came close to working. This was the best one, which again is faint praise. Battlebowl. It won't outstay its welcome. The great stuff was great, and the bad stuff was kind of okay. And the really bad stuff, everything was nice and quick. And it, 17-year-old me, 3 hours of wrestling on a VHS tape. Thank you very much. I'll have that. And it was $9.99 rather than $12.99.
Oh, bargain.
Yep.
Liam, what's your verdict?
So, yeah, as we've kind of already established, this podcast is about all things WCW, but there is a particular fondness amidst both co-hosts and a lot of our guests for that early 90s era in particular. There's nothing wrong with that. This is more our jam than any other particular aspect of WCW's run. And considering that Bill Watts was in charge with this reign of terror pretty much all through, well, his reign was basically 3/4 or 2/3 of 1992, wasn't it? It'd soon be done for, thankfully, on this timeline. But every time there is a pay-per-view, and I think we may have covered them all now, or most of them.
I think we have, because Festival 92, he'd just come into the role and was almost like on a watching brief, wasn't he? And
Bash, yep. So we go into Bash 92. We had Beach Blast, which was the first one, and he might not be able to get his grubby mitts on it as much. Bash 92, we had
done both of them.
Yeah, Halloween Havoc,
Bash 92, he got his mitts into it. When you had
God,
Rick Rude versus Ric Flair in an amazing Iron Man match, you had Sting versus Cactus Jack in a Great Falls Cat Anywhere match, and your main event is a tag team match. It's a 30-minute draw. Yeah, I think Bill had his mitts on that one.
But yeah, we've covered all those, and you find the overall verdict of all of those seems to be, it comes down to who wins the battle to the death between Bill Watts and his Bill Watts fucking ways and WCW in 1992 and everything that we hold dear about that era. And Beach Blast won out. As you said, there were definite marks there where he was starting to get his mitts over it, but there was enough goodness. It was a great show. Bash 92 on the other hand, we covered very recently, and that was a messy one, wasn't it, Dean? Only Sting Vader shone through. The rest of it, I think, even though we had great fun doing the podcast, just re-watching and talking about the show was sapping my will to live. Halloween Havoc 1992, we know who won that out of WCW goodness and Bill Watts. That was a one-sided massacre. That was a depressing watch. This one, as Chris alluded to, this was a rare instance where the good things about WCW just put up enough of a fight to squeak it past the shit. It was a 3-2 thriller, but there was just enough of the things we like to make up for the things that, yeah, granted, when you're a teenager, Chris, you're going to completely overlook. But now we're not teenagers anymore. We're very much grizzled, middle-aged comic book guys out of The Simpsons. But despite that, it's just leaning up that thumb.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I just realized it was Rude v Steamboat. Rude v Flair would be in '93. Flair was still in was still in WWF by this point. But yeah, that and we've talked before. Rude and Steamboat is such a great rivalry as well. But anyway, yeah. So that draws a line on Starrcade 92. That therefore draws the line on the Bill Watts era pay-per-views.
Thank Christ for that.
I'm sure we can rustle up a Clash of the Champions if we really need to, Liam. Chris, before we let you go, how can people find you on socials and all that malarkey?
Oh, well, I've just started a new thing. I've fallen in with this pagan cult in Brighton who sacrifice magpies by drowning them
in a murder pond.
You have to improvise. Obviously, given the choice, we would have a lake at the foot of a very imposing mountain, but sometimes you've just got to go with what you have to hand.
Absolutely.
So, and it is true. One for sorrow, two for joy. So you're welcome. We've blessed your pond. You're going to have a joyous pond. Yeah, reality. Yeah, I sat on that fucking joke all the way from the beginning.
Yeah, so Chris, where can we find you on social media?
If you still want to, and I forgive you if you don't, it's like I've not gigged since October. Yeah, look for me on Twitter. Pretty much, if you type @the Brooker Man into most social media, you'll find me. I've got a Facebook page set up for my comedy, which I don't update. I've got a Facebook page for my promo and confidence coaching, because I've, as well as working with wrestlers. So whether you're a trainee and you're looking to get started, you're trying to get your legs under yourself as a character, or you're just looking for someone to bounce ideas off, whether you're more experienced, you want to give yourself a fresh coat of paint or a few new ideas, because when wrestling comes back, it's a good time to get your ducks in order. Everyone's training. Yeah. You won't think twice about getting shredded in the gym or something. You diet out. Think about your character promo. Give me a shout. I can help you. Drop me a DM. And if in general, if you're struggling with the aspect of public speaking, your confidence or presentations, I like to think we've all got it in us to be at least good at it, and I can help take a bit of that fear away. So yeah, drop me a line. I can help you out. And that's how you find me, just @the Brooker Man.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And of course, you can find us on Twitter @BecauseWCW or on Facebook.com/BecauseWCW. All 93 of our episodes are available to download from becausewcw.podbean.com or wherever you get your podcasts from. Chris, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. The door is open for you to return anytime you like for what was it we just mentioned? World War III. There you go.
Oh,
yes.
Someone's got to take that hit.
Yeah,
wherever there's a battle royal, I will happily be your battle royal specialist.
We will pencil you in for a World War III later on in the year. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you survive the remaining few weeks or months of lockdown, whatever it might be, and that you're back gigging very soon. And if you are passing a comedy club and you see Chris Brooker's name on the poster, go along. A good night is guaranteed. Thanks a lot, Chris. And well, I think that's it from all of us. So on behalf of Chris, on behalf of Liam, this is me, the Twisted Genius, saying thank you so much for taking the time and trouble to download this episode. Please tell a friend if you like us. Keep it to yourself if you don't. And we will see you ringside.